to honor, bro?
Yeah.
What happened to honor and principle? We should define ourselves with timeless Islamic principles, not utilitarian relationships. Some of them don't even pray, bro. They don't even pray. They don't even worship Allah. It's infotainment for these people. Honestly, take your face out of his posterior, man.
Yeah.
Like, have some honor.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a great guy. We're doing things, brotherhood. Wallahi, when I see things like this, it's like, I don't know what to say. Oh, but it's halal, bro. I don't like that attitude in the dawah. Halal. Shut your mouth, halal. There is a competition of halals. The du'at should have always the mindset, I want to do the thing that's most pleasing
What
to
happened
Allah.
to ihsan?
Exactly. But we're liberals.
Yeah.
We become,
Yeah.
we are probably more liberals than some of the liberals. 'Cause at least the liberals work together for a certain goal, right?
Do you know how Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu dealt with the Andrew Tate of his time? Do you know he dealt with a similar man like
I think
Andrew
he shaved
Tate?
his head and put him on the front line.
No.
That was another scenario, yeah? If you stay silent, that's cowardice. If you stay silent for the sake of not getting friction from people who are more liberal or secular, or the people that you want to appease, is disgraceful. It's almost like we're very gang orientated to a certain degree. I know that sounds like a stereotype, but you know, once you attach yourself to someone, then he's my guy and I'm gonna, you know, support him to the nth degree. You have brothers in the dawah, including myself, when we make mistakes, we're not really held to account in the way that we should. And we're not advised. Because it's easy. I could leave my organization and do my own thing. I'll probably make lots of money too, right? With my influence, or even with the following that I have, or the skills that I have. I could be individualistic and brand orientated. I could do it. You go, okay, what is the solution? It will hopefully create more of a maturity in assessing some of these things, rather than us being, oh yeah, he's so great, he's so amazing. You know, that kind of immature fanboy, manboy attitude, right?
Welcome everyone to the Life Haqq podcast. We have an interesting and I think a spectacular episode lined up for you today. We have none other with us than the notorious H.A.T. Hamza Andreas Zorsis. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Life Haqq podcast here in beautiful British Columbia.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
MashaAllah. It's I feel it was an action-packed weekend. We had a lot of beautiful conversations. We were able to engage with the community. And we have this time now to get into some deep, hopefully, issues that can benefit the community and hopefully spark some reflections and thoughts and transformations that people didn't think was capable with a podcast. So I want to start firstly with an easy question, a non-controversial question. Jordan Peterson, friend or foe?
He's a foe, 100%.
Okay.
Of course, he's an enemy to himself, to be honest, because I think he is very unprincipled. He's a very weak character. I think he has the kind of internal drive that makes him form conclusions that's against his natural disposition, the disposition of the human being that Allah created within every single one of us, because we have an affinity for some objective moral truths or values. We have an affinity for justice and fairness. Primarily, we have an affinity for affirming the oneness and worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in his context, he's a very weak human being, and he basically is riding the civilizational materialistic wave. It happens to be the case that at this moment in time, the West, from a materialistic perspective and maybe militarily, is declining, but it's still the superpower. And he is basically using that as his kind of backup and support. That's why he's forming the ridiculous conclusions that he has formed. His interview with Benjamin Netanyahu was a disgrace. Anyone who reads around on the topic will know that the way he framed the discussion and the way he has framed his positions are not based on historical reality, are based on false assumptions. So from that perspective, definitely he is a foe.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, like with most things, especially from an Islamic spiritual perspective, when you go against the truth, essentially you are oppressing yourself. You're wronging yourself. Like Allah says, we did not wrong them, they wronged themselves. So he is a foe. He can be a friend by accepting reality, significantly spiritual reality, the metaphysical reality, that there is no deity worthy of worship, worthy of our humble adoration except the deity Allah, and also accepting political reality as well, specifically what's happening in Palestine. So he can be a friend, of course. We don't close the door on people, but at the moment he's a foe. But I feel sorry for him actually, because I find that he's very, very weak and morally weak. Actually, he's a moral coward. Because even the positions he's taken that may express some form of courage, I think is strategic courage, meaning he knows that he has backup and he knows he can anchor off certain groups or people and all of these things, right? But when it comes to significant issues, when you may be alone, he does not have that type of courage. He's very weak, very weak. And he displayed that with the whole issue with regards to Palestine. So yeah, he's a foe, but he's an enemy to himself as well.
Yeah.
And that's the the kind of deeper Islamic spiritual context, which is if you reject reality, you're really rejecting yourself. Don't be like those who forgot Allah and Allah made them forget their own selves. He doesn't know who he is, right?
He was looked upon at one point as somebody who could be an example for men, somebody who could mentor men perhaps, and it seemed like he was getting traction in the Muslim world as well, amongst Muslims, not just the Muslim world, but let's just say Muslims in general, because Muslims in the West also were interested in appreciating some of his content. Was that a mistake?
Well, I don't think it's a mistake, because it's easy to say in retrospect. I mean, some of the stuff that he was saying seems to be functional, it works. Some of the principles that he was articulating can enable a life that is full of well-being, a sense of direction. For sure, we're not going to disagree with some of these, what I would call universal principles or ideas. The problem is generally speaking, especially in our modern context, that people lack the maturity to understand that you can take something good from someone and actually understand what is bad. And unfortunately, in the Muslim community, I don't think we've reached the level of maturity. And what I mean by the Muslim community is the young male Muslim community online. It's almost like we're very gang orientated to a certain degree. I know that sounds like a stereotype, but once you attach yourself to someone, then he's my guy and I'm gonna, support him to the nth degree. And they would only basically reject that person after, something significant has happened.
Yes.
But they won't have the insight prior to that to think, you know what, we need to basically tender our love and respect for this person because he's a human being and he doesn't share our worldview and he makes mistakes.
Yes.
But unfortunately, we have this fanboy mentality, and this exists in the Dawah itself, right?
Yes.
You have brothers in the Dawah, including myself, when we make mistakes, we're not really held to account in the way that we should. And we're not advised. And I think there's a problem in that. We have a very kind of fan-based model, which is part of the algorithm. The algorithm is designed to create that kind of environment anyways. But the point is, I wouldn't say it's a mistake. So when you listen to something, when there is something of wisdom, right? When you have someone who's applied knowledge in a particular context in order to achieve a particular psychological, social, intellectual goal, and it's functional, and it makes you flourish, of course you're going to respect that person and have an affinity for that person, for sure. But it requires a sense of maturity to understand that this person is not like, an angel that came from the heavens. And we should see the signs as well. And we should be able to say, okay, with this person, he made a good point here, but all these other points, they're wrong. Now, the other argument would be, well, doesn't it presuppose that you should have a framework or a reference point or a filter or a lens to understand what is good in the first place, to understand what good you should take and what is bad that you should basically, remove yourself away from. Yes, it does presuppose that. And that maturity, therefore, means you have to be more grounded in your deen, more grounded in your religion, more grounded in the Aqidah of Islam, more grounded in Islamic morality. What does Allah say about these situations? What are the key principles of the deen that I can use, learn and internalize so they become a filter for me or a lens for me to understand when someone says something good, I can take it, and when someone says something bad, I can't take it. So there are nuances to this. So generally speaking, maybe there's an advice here that when young men who are not grounded in the deen and they see someone that doesn't share the same worldview and they may be saying something good, it's probably advised for them to not continue with that person and basically find someone within their tradition who actually is more grounded in the truth, Islam, with the correct principles to actually help guide them. And this raises another point. And the other point is, well, why would people go to someone like JP, Dr. Jordan Peterson or others? Because maybe there's not enough of us in the community rising and actually articulating a positive case for our tradition and making it universal, where Muslims and non-Muslims can be like, wow, this is workable. This is something that I want to live. This is a way of life that I want to practice and internalize. Maybe that could be the case. But so there are a lot of nuances to that. So yeah, in retrospect, we could say it was wrong. But what can we do?
And based on that, in that same vein, do you think it was poor judgment for us to give him such a big platform within the Muslim community? Because we were platforming. Obviously, we were inviting him to masajid, some of the bigger Muslim podcasts and so forth, and engaging with him in that level. Do you think, in retrospect, that may have been a poor decision?
Well, in retrospect, many decisions are poor decisions.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying in retrospect, like in the time. Like, were there, even when you look back at it, were there red flags, that you could have said, hey, this is something that maybe did not sit with me right at the time, but now that I look back at it, maybe at this juncture we could have made a different decision, or I understood that maybe this guy is not a sincere actor. From the outside looking in, right? Obviously you have bigger platforms and you were directly engaging with him. I felt that was a critical moment when both you and Muhammad Hijab invited him to the masjid, and he went through that scenario of, and he said something to the, like, what is, like, he started questioning the definition of what is belief.
He became a postmodernist.
Yeah, exactly. In an instant.
What do you mean by belief? What do you mean by God? So you adopt the methodology of the postmodernist when it suits you, and you go against them when it doesn't suit you.
Exactly. So for me, it just, that moment did, like, it set off alarm bells, because all of a sudden, you're complete, like, you try to operate, okay, we have to have standardized a metric of truth that we can all come together and engage with each other on, right? And he obviously opposes many of these postmodernist ideas, but in an instant it changed just with that one question. You know what I mean? So to me, that was like is this a sincere actor, or engage? Look, for me to engage with.
There's a few questions here.
Yeah.
There's the success of the discussion.
Yes.
And there's the retrospective analysis whether that discussion should have been had or not, right?
Yeah.
Should have happened or not. So there's a few things. I don't think it's blameworthy to invite someone who's very popular, that has access to millions of non-Muslims, to engage with them and give them dawah. There's nothing blameworthy in the tradition concerning this. So that's something that we have to actually admit and discuss, right? And especially if the discussion is challenging, if the discussion is giving them da'wah, calling them to Allah, calling them to Islam, showing the veracity of Islam, having a nuanced intellectual discussion on these issues. Now, whether that was achieved or not is a different discussion, but the intention of having such a discussion is not blameworthy at all. What may be blameworthy is that if there were patterns or signs in the person's behavior or in their strategy that seemed to be the case, that he was using us in order to gain more popularity, and he was using us for a particular strategic goal, which is antithetical to the Islamic worldview. That could be the case. However, these are probabilities, and you make inferences, and you have to make a judgment call. Now, when Jordan Peterson came to the masjid and Muhammad Hijab had the discussion with him, he just, I think recently, he got into bed, if you like, with the Daily Wire, right? And we know they're pro-Zionist and so on and so forth. You have Ben Shapiro, that kind of intellectual moral weasel, who runs that show, if you like, And
some say it's a psyop for Mossad, but
I mean, so that was a sign. That was a sign of, you know, is this the right thing to do? But I think during that time there was already a commitment that was made. So there was not much that we can do. What we could do is give him dawah. Now, in retrospect, during that discussion, maybe there should have been a greater effort in holding him to account with certain positions or certain alliances that he made, for sure. Did that happen as best as we think it should have? Probably not. Probably not. But yeah, look, we live and learn. This is the nature of the dawah. And there's no like halal and haram on this issue.
No, this is a matter. You're making your own personal.
You're making a personal. You're making a judgment. And you know, we did shura, we did consultation, and we came to a particular conclusion. So now, subsequently, though, right after his interview with Benjamin Netanyahu, and his tweet or
and
ex-post
that very
on
condescending
give
video.
Them hill,
and even prior to that, I don't know if you
the message to the Muslims,
condescending
so
message.
All of those things, I do believe collectively we should have been a little bit more assertive with him and hold him to account. I mean, I was assertive with him. I mean, I did a video. I deconstructed him. I was very kind of assertive and even harsh. But maybe other actors in our team or dawah, and they have their own reasons and their own strategic reasons why they may not be seen to be as assertive with these kind of people. My position is no, collectively we should have been much more assertive with him, much more assertive with him.
You know, we're obviously, I'm Canadian, he's Canadian. And he actually, I recognize his personality type because I've grown up, like he grew up in like small town Saskatchewan. I did the same thing. So I get a lot of the references. So in his book, this is 12 Rules for Life. A lot of the things that he talks about, how he grew up and his references, culturally I understood that right away because I was born and raised, and I can get that. You know, even dealing with the cold and the brutal, and all that stuff. And initially, I appreciated, some of his content and his pushback against, this popular cultural trend. The
postmodernist.
Yeah. I appreciated that, but I recognize there's almost it's a really subtle and condescending way that they deal with minorities and people. Like they try to make it look like we're all good, we're all equal, but at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, good boy. That's a nice idea, but this is what the adults are thinking. You know what I mean? This is what you know what I mean. So, because I've recognized that it's always like on the front. Yeah, we believe in these liberal ideas. You're equal, everything. We need to treat people in good ways and so forth. But when you go down, when the rubber hits the road, this idea of supremacy is there. It's almost a supremacist idea. It's like, yeah, you guys have good, like, you have, you Muslims, you have a nice, culture, and you do this and this and this. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like, okay, you're not evolved yet to where we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? This is an undertone that I've seen all my life with this, and I know how they hide it. That's why culturally, I could see in the way that he was talking and the phrases that he was, it's like, I recognize this.
Yeah.
I saw this with my teachers. I saw this with, the people, within the community.
Yeah. This echoes what I said about he's riding the civilizational wave.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's to the degree where he actually feels superior.
Yeah.
I think he's very weak. I think he has an inferiority complex.
I would disagree with that. I feel he does feel like he is superior, but it doesn't mean that you are necessarily strong.
Yeah, maybe that's more accurate.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't want to psychoanalyze him. I'm not a psychologist, but what I've seen is that, you know, the West is right, might is right.
Yes.
The kind of values that he proposes are right. Like even his ideas on freedom of speech are incoherent, frankly. He's not a philosopher.
Yes.
He's not very smart, by the way. And you know, if you're going to punch down, right? So you're going to have an interview with that lady from Channel 4, I believe. He was punching down, isn't it? Yeah. But if he's going to have some kind of a philosophical heavyweight and debate with him on certain specific issues, that's when you start to see that his ideas start to crumble. You know? And we saw that in many cases, in many videos that he's had with various philosophers or thinkers. So, you know, freedom of speech is like one of the holy cows, right, of modernity or the Western tradition. And even his articulation of it is actually not that coherent, which we could unpack another time. But the point here is he is riding the civilizational wave. He has this internal weakness, I believe, and that's why he's latching onto it. And he has his own internal doubts and concerns about certain ideas and principles. And yeah, I mean, what can we say? I mean, he blocked me and then he unblocked me on X because I held him to account. I did a video and so on and so forth.
Yes. I think.
And I corrected him.
I saw this. For a person who believes in freedom of speech and all of these different, like in the freedom of speech necessitates that you are able to offend somebody. You know, essentially, you know, some of the things that he says. He started mass blocking anybody critical or opposing or pushing back.
But he would argue that that's not basically trying to restrict your freedom of speech. He's saying, I just don't want to hear what you have to say. You can still say it. So that would be his argument.
I understand.
But let's zoom in on that particular point though. Is it necessarily true that freedom of expression, freedom of speech necessitates freedom to insult? No, it doesn't. And this is the point. Because philosophers don't really give freedom of speech intrinsic value. It's a utility. It's a means to particular ends. Even when you read the works of John Stuart Mill and others, what is the means? It's human flourishing. It's to acquire truth. It's to have civilizational progress. It's to discover. It's to, you know, hold powers to account. So those are what you call the objectives of freedom of speech. So freedom of speech is like a vehicle, freedom of expression, that its destination is to do what? To be able to hold powers to account, to acquire truth, and so on and so forth. So his argument that insult necessitates freedom of expression is actually not necessarily true, because there are many scenarios whereby if you insult gratuitously, with intentionally, and it's directional, right, to a group of people or person, it could become a barrier to the objectives of freedom of speech.
Yes.
Imagine, for example, the late scientist Stephen Hawking. He goes to an audience and he wants to actually articulate what he believes to be the truth about, I don't know, his understanding of gravity or whatever the case may be. And he starts by spending the first 15 minutes insulting everyone's culture and mother. Right?
Yes.
That's going to be a barrier. I know that's a crude example, but you get the point. That's going to be a barrier to fulfilling the objectives of freedom of speech. Now, there are gray areas because one, you know, what do we mean by insult? What type of insult are we talking about? But the point is, it's not necessarily true that insult necessitates the objectives of freedom of speech, right?
Yes.
It would only make sense if you give intrinsic value to freedom of speech. So I can say what I want to say just because I want to say what I want to say. But philosophers don't really give freedom of speech as a value that kind of grounding, if you like.
Yes.
They say it's utility. It's like even John Stuart Mill, it's for like human flourishing, it's for truth, for accountability, and so on and so forth. So his argument itself is incoherent practically and even socially, right? You would not have the scientific enterprise if, you know, you felt that necessarily you need to be able to insult, right? Now, obviously, sometimes when we articulate a position, or we may have certain ideas, like, you know, I'm a Muslim, you're a Muslim, and we may basically challenge the Trinity, for example, that is incoherent and it doesn't make sense and it's all rationally absurd. Even articulating in that way, someone on the receiving end, the person might be, well, I find this insulting.
Yes.
I get it. Right? There's not much we can do about that. So, you know, in the process of freedom of expression, you have to be able to articulate things in a certain way. But there's a difference between intellectual dialogue where you're intending goodness, you're intending to actually, touch, move, and inspire people. You're intending to express yourself so you could be understood. You're intending to have that discussion. And there's a difference between that. I just want to literally insult you and degrade you.
Yes.
Gratuitous degradation.
Is freedom of speech the end or the means?
That's the point. So it's a means. So if it's a means, then you're going to try and tailor your speech as best as possible in order for you to be understood, because you want to reach the objectives of freedom of speech. Now, some people, they basically don't even care about being understood or not. They just want to gratuitously offend and degrade, right?
Yes.
And that goes against the objectives of freedom of speech. Imagine, for example, we meet the Chinese president, and we want to hold him to account because of his genocide of the Uyghurs. And we start by basically insulting Chinese culture, Chinese language, Chinese people. That's going to be a barrier to effective accountability, holding him to account.
Yes.
Do you see? So there are many scenarios concerning the objectives of freedom of speech where if you are gratuitously degrading and insulting intentionally and directionally, it goes against the very objectives of freedom of speech. Now, yes, there's going to be times where you express yourself even with an intentional way, with goodness, and you want to be understood. People are going to still find it might be an insult. But those are the gray areas that we can navigate. The point on this whole discussion was just to show that he's actually wrong.
Yes.
He presupposes an intrinsic value to freedom of speech, but it's not, it's a means to an end, and he presupposes that it's necessary that gratuitous insults and degradation is required to achieve the objectives of freedom of speech, and that's actually not the case at all.
Yeah.
If you read the works of Van Mill, for example, and others, when they talk about freedom of speech, they say there's no such thing as absolute freedom of speech, because the idea of freedom of speech is that freedom of expression is allowed in society, or it should be allowed in society, but it's based on other competing values. So the question is not really, am I allowed to express myself? Can I have freedom of thought and intellectual activity? That is a question in some cases, but it's not necessarily the question. The question is, what are the other competing values that we have to consider that may restrict freedom of speech? Because no one says freedom of speech should be unrestricted. No one. In every Western society, bro, every Western culture, Sweden, America, UK, there's hate laws, libel laws. Even in France, liberty, equality, fraternity. Even you can't even insult the flag. You get in prison or something.
And
right?
not only that, this is another dimension that sometimes people overlook, is that we have confidentiality agreements. So, for example, as a health professional, could I say I have freedom of speech and I can reveal all your personal and private information?
Yes, of course not.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
No, but what if it has an absolute intrinsic value? Then that within it itself is virtuous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think
But
you
it doesn't. But it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's why no one says that.
Yes.
So and we have to understand that this language, when they talk about freedom of speech, is really an ideological and political ploy. It's a smokescreen in a way sometimes. Don't get me wrong. In certain cases, especially with Dr. Jordan Peterson, there is a validity to his discourse because people were actually restricting certain truths that he wanted to articulate. So, but I'm just giving the kind of philosophical background so people understand what's going on. So, Van Mill discusses, as I said, about, there is no absolute freedom of speech, right? And it's going to be restricted based on other competing values. And that's why in the UK you have hate speech laws.
Yes.
Right? You have libel laws in America. You have product defamation laws. You have all of this stuff. Even in the UN, when it talks about freedom of speech, it talks about, what's conducive to the common good and social harmony and community cohesion. These are all things that we have to navigate. To present it as, no, we can insult anyone is shallow, and it doesn't represent the political social reality, even in the West, right?
Yeah.
And my point here is, therefore, the discussion should be then, okay, what are the values that we should be adopting? What are the other competing values? So it shifts the discussion from freedom of speech or liberty to express yourself to what values must we adopt in order to facilitate the objectives of freedom of speech, truth, accountability, and progress, and where should they come from? And that's where the Dawah should come. You say, well, Islam, right? Islam. Because what a lot of these proponents do, they just use these kind of pseudo-intellectual arguments to do what? To actually promote hatred against civility, in essence. A lot of them don't want civilized discussion. And you see that a lot, especially with the liberals, right? Freedom of speech is great, we should have freedom of speech. And the minute you challenge liberalism, for example, you challenge the premises of liberalism like atomism or individualism, you start challenging the kind of social fruits, if you like, or rotten fruits of liberalism, then they start attacking you and censoring you and all of that stuff. They hold on a second, what happened to freedom of speech and discussion? Let's discuss, let's articulate ourselves about these issues. And also the other thing is about power dynamic, because traditionally freedom of speech was about people who are weak to be able to hold powers to account.
Yes.
But it's the other way around. Like when you see France, for example, France uses the idea of freedom of speech to attack minorities. Exactly. But it was supposed to be historically the other way around, you see.
And actually, historically, they used freedom of speech laws because they had these laws against pornography, right?
Yes.
And distributing these types of lewdness massively in society. But actually, these laws were used to allow for the distribution of pornography. It's all freedom. It all comes from these freedom of speech laws, right?
So yeah, I mean, there's so much more to say about this particular issue. I've done presentations on this, but that should be enough to get you to think that there's more to it than the kind of punching down narrative that Jordan Peterson does with certain people. He punches down, which is this, again, sign of weakness in a way. I mean, I would love to discuss this topic. I've researched it thoroughly.
I'll give you another example, just for a personal thing to just try to show you where I see this type of archetype of a person. I was at a conference, professionally, highly educated professionals, okay? And, in the mornings before the classes, I went to the gym to work out. And this one other man, he was at the gym to work out. And so we would be working out together. Developed a nice camaraderie because we were the only two people in the gym that are going to class. And he revealed to me over time, he said to me, make sure you take care of yourself and really focus on yourself. And I'm like, why is he emphasizing this? So he revealed to me, he just went through a really messy divorce. He was married for many years, and he provided everything for his family and his kids, and he's kind of estranged for them. His wife, literally, he said his wife left him because she said, "I'm bored."
Oh my God.
You know what I mean? So she left him, this marriage for so many years. He put so much time and effort in this, working hard, spending time with the kids, helping out at home, doing whatever he could. The same man who is essentially telling a stranger all his life problems, in the same breath, we went out for dinner one night, and he started talking about, because I wanted to take him to a place where there's not going to be alcohol served and stuff like that. So we went to a halal, like, shawarma place, right? So the topic comes out about, like, Arab nations and things like that, because it's obviously Arab food. And then he described Morocco. He started talking about the people of Morocco and the country of Morocco. And he was talking about them in a really disparaging way, like they're backwards. And they, he's like, it's like you're going into biblical times, you're going, what I mean, in terms of like their civilization and the lack of advancement compared to the West, right? And subhanAllah, that's, why I say you can have the superiority, because he feels superior to them. But this man is so fragile and weak.
Absolutely.
He's so weak, like his whole family left him. All his ideas and all his ideology and whatever he thought his worldview was has come now and crashed down. But instead of being self-reflective, and I just see that same thing with Jordan Peterson, instead of being self-reflective, why did I, crash out on depression and, I'm on these medications and the trad family, I don't really have that around me, things of that nature. Instead of being self-reflective and say, okay, what is the truth? It's almost like you double down on this supremacist idea. No, we know what's right. These people here, they're backwards. You'll see those same poor Moroccan families being much more happier, having strong families in terms of their civilization and their children and their progeny and all of these different things. They have much more healthier relationships. You don't look at that. But the metric that you look at is like, look at these backwards people. It
exposes a principle or so-called metaphysic that they have, that success or having a great civilization only means material progress.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Who said that's the case?
Yeah.
Who said it's the case that having a great civilization or your civilization is the best? It's based on true values because it produces, material progress and scientific progress. Where did you get that principle from?
Yeah. Because he's a millionaire.
What about
this man is a millionaire.
But what about moral progress?
Yeah.
What about contentment? What about the ultimate objective of human life is to have well-being, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, we could define what that means, but when you look at places like Morocco, they're not putting their parents into old people's home.
Yes.
Right? There's a sense of trust, right? There is a sense of contentment. There's a sense of understanding the real values in life, like family values, like love, like connection, like community. Because in the West, it's not communitarian. It's very what you call excessive individualism. Or, or atomism, if you like. Yeah.
Yeah.
The primacy is on the individual, which has, actually produced a lot of rotten fruits, especially from a social fragmentation point of view. So, we should challenge those people. Say, so what? You have money and you know how to use a computer and you have some machines. You're a friggin' cripple. Yeah. That's what you are. Yeah. Eric Fromm, he's got this book.
Bro, I've seen millionaires, like, because in my world, you rub shoulders with some people who have they're like basically in a wealthy class in that strata.
Yeah, they're sad.
And they have no one to talk to.
But this is my point. So
literally, they pour their heart out to like strangers.
Eric Fromm makes a really excellent point. And it's a book called The Art of Being.
Yeah.
And he has this concept of a way of being that is a way of having. So a lot of people in the West, what they do is they just want to have things. The house, the car, the money, That's their way of having. And you think it basically, gives you a sense of purpose or it makes you. But what he argues is these are your crutches.
Yeah.
Right? And then when they're removed, you're actually really a kind of moral cripple. You're crippled existentially. Your whole purpose is just a way of having.
Yes.
Right? And that's all you are. And then he makes a really, really powerful point about machines. He says that, human beings, we are enslaved to our own machines. And without them, we're cripples. We've idolized machines, right?
Yes.
We think we're very powerful, but we only achieve that because of these machines. But if you remove the machines out of the equation, then you see how very weak the human being is. And yet we need those machines now. And as a result, we become enslaved by them, which is very, very powerful. And I actually realized this. I lost my phone for about maybe 8-10 hours yesterday. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so dependent on this phone. So I'm going to try and create strategies that I'm less dependent on it, of course. So the point here is, why is it the case that, money and this type of materialistic progress means that your civilization is great or it's true? It doesn't follow. And plus it's very myopic as well. What I mean by that is you're just zooming in on a particular part of history. But, you've just had this for about 100 or 200 years. Islam had this for over 1,000 years. We have a greater curriculum vitae than you. Our kings or sultans had libraries when your kings couldn't read or write. If you look at Islamic Spain, for example, it was considered by academics paradise on earth. It had at that time relative technological and intellectual advancements. If you were, look how shallow you are. If you were born at that period, you would be a Muslim saying, look, we're the greatest civilization because we have progress and this and money.
Yes.
So you're just basically what that mindset just shows and is an indicative of that person's actually a sheep. He's actually enslaved to the ideological hegemonic discourse. He's enslaved to the social norm, and it happens to be, he happens to live in the West. But if he lived about maybe a couple of 100 years ago in Islamic Spain, it would be a different story. He'll be one of those Muslims who'd be like praising the Spanish Caliphate or praising the Islamic civilization because we had material wealth, we had intellectual activity, we had material progress, to the point where Thomas Arnold says in his book, The Preaching of Islam, he says that Muslim Spain was a kind of milestone that was in a way historically necessary in order to basically propel Europe into the Renaissance, right? So it's sheep. It's a sheep mentality, and it needs to be exposed. You need to challenge them on these issues. Like, what would you rather have? In actual fact, and this is the irony, because when you question them and say, look, what would you rather have? Would you rather have a loving wife and children, right, and live in a hut, or have all this money and you don't trust your wife, you don't have loving children, you're going to be sent to literally concentration camp? That's what it is. A glorified concentration camp in the West is that you send your parents to be taken care of by other people. That's what they do. You just send them to these, social concentration camps, right? This is not part of our values. I'm sorry. You can keep your money. You can keep your material progress. Yes. You're just a cripple. These are just your crutches. And when they're gone, you're a cripple. But look at us. We may not have that stuff civilizationally, if you like, but that can be also challenged because of what's happening in the Middle East and other places. But notwithstanding that and other.
But I also would say that I would also say that's
cripples.
I would say that's also an evidence for Islam. I would
100%.
say that because one could say that because if Islam was number one materially, superpower, say it never ended, the Khilafah never ended.
Yes.
One could make the argument people only follow this religion and convert to this religion, accept this religion, because it's the dominant power structure.
Yes.
We had that. We had that at points. But why are people still accepting Islam? Why are within non-Muslim countries, in Muslim countries it's still very stable and people are growing and whatnot? When we don't have the geopolitical power, people are still holding on to their religion. To that level, that to me is an evidence.
Yes.
Because it shows that even without political and military power to back it up, that system, the principles, the core principles still flourish.
Agreed. Look what's happening in Gaza, for example.
Yes.
If that happened in London or in Paris, the whole world would be on fire.
Yes.
You would have a group of human beings that would break every single moral principle that you can ever think of, right? But the people of Gaza, because of that Islamic principles, they've transcended their suffering because they've given it a different meaning. They've given it the meaning that Allah and His Messenger wants them to have with regards to the suffering that they're facing. And they're able to transcend that suffering to a certain degree and actually show to the world that this is how you deal with a genocide, right?
Yes.
But if it happened to any other group of people, the whole world would be on fire. In actual fact, the reason I mentioned the existential, moral, and intellectual cripples, because when you remove the money and the power and the machinery, they're just cripples. And case in point, in our and I've said this many times, in our Western civilization or in the countries that we live in, if you were to take away people's money, people's shelter, people's core essential needs, right? I'm telling you, they'll turn into animals. They'll be killing each other. Now, that might sound like a stereotype. There are lots of very good people in Western societies too. Of course, I've traveled the world. I'm not going to otherize and say everyone's the same. The Quran says in chapter 3, verse 113, I believe, people are not the same. There are good people amongst different groups. But I'm just saying, in general, if you were to take the money, the shelter, the basic necessities, a lot of people would be killing each other, right? But we've seen Muslim societies, that's happened, right? Look what happened in Iraq, maybe over 1 million people died. Look what's happening in Gaza, the genocide, and so on and so forth. They've kept the kind of human dignity, right? They've kept the kind of core values. And I don't think that would exist in our kind of avid materialistic society because their crutches are machines, money, power, all of that stuff. But when they let go of that or it's removed from them, they become basically moral cripples.
It's interesting you say that. They did a study.
Look what happened in COVID, bro.
Yeah.
They were fighting over toilet paper.
Oh,
case in point.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. They did a study where they found that any country, this is whether it's non-Muslim or Muslim, any country where the Muslim population increases by 1%, extramarital sexual relations goes down by 2%.
Wow.
You understand what I'm saying? So just the presence of Muslims with their principles and values, it has like an immediate moral effect within society.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
On the same vein, okay, because we're talking about platforming and we really went deep into JP and associated matters. Again, an area that you and people you're connected to have some experience and relations. Is the trend of these you could say newly reverted influencers?
Yeah.
Okay, especially in like I felt this was like a big issue amongst Muslim women a few years ago, where you had like these muhajjabat, like giving fashion tutorials or different things like that, being these big like influencers, and then all of a sudden they would change and do something else, right?
Yes.
Now it seems like there's a big focus amongst the Muslim community, amongst men,
Yes.
young males, and we see these influencers. They accept Islam, and then again this hero worship, gravitating towards the brightest star, and again, did we platform some of these people too much? They're new Muslims, so we're not talking about even JP, who's not a Muslim. Did we platform them too early? They became too much of an authority. They had too much influence. Was there enough, checking or pushback against some of the ideas that they were bringing into the mix? What are your thoughts on that? Because I think we're in the middle of this right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have an amazing, polite way of holding me to account. It's good. You're right, bro.
Yeah.
You're right. Like obviously obviously talking about Andrew Tate and others. Look, my position.
I'm impressed that you can actually say his name, because some people are afraid to what's going to be the pushback and things like that.
I mean, I hopefully do not consider myself one of the algorithm prostitutes where I'm a slave to the algorithm. I need people to like and share me. I'm too old for that. Yeah, I'm 44 now. I mean, sorry to say.
Yeah.
The point is, I would agree that when people have a massive platform and they become Muslim, and I mentioned this in a very early podcast, I think it was a Thinking Muslim podcast, the advice is don't say anything, get off social media, learn your religion. Simple as that. Learn what Allah says. Have an Allah-centric life. It's as simple as that. And that didn't happen. And, unfortunately, because we have not very good parenting in some Muslim communities, people look up to people like this because they're rich and they're articulate. But when you look at some of the stuff that they've been promoting, which is literally arrogance, I'm not saying they're arrogant. I'm not judging anyone. I believe everyone's better than me. Hassan al-Basri said, one of the famous scholars of Islam, that when you leave the house, you should believe every Muslim is better than you. Why? This is a rational point. Because you have to have husn al-dhan, good opinion of others. You know your context and your sins and your failures. You don't know theirs, and you have to have a good opinion of them. So by default, they're better than you. So there's not a judgment. But from the apparent, it's arrogance. It's avid capitalism, excessive capitalistic mindset. It's principles and ideas that are
so you don't believe like a real
to the
you don't
deen.
believe like a real man should be a multi-millionaire and drive the most is that like a requirement for being a real rijal, a real man?
That's not a necessary requirement
you know
at
what I
all,
mean?
because look at the best men that walked this planet, the Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ, they didn't have anything. But that doesn't also mean that we shouldn't actually try and get a portion of the dunya. Of course we should. That's neither here or there. But these are not necessary features of being a man. In actual fact, when you study what it means to be a true man, you actually deal with your ego. You actually deal with the spiritual disease of the heart. I don't care if you can fight and you can speak and you have money. If you're arrogant, you're a weasel. You're a moral weasel, with all due respect. I'm saying this in general terms, of course. If you can't bench press your ego, I don't care how much you can bench press, right? I don't care. All due respect, we need to go back to basics. And where are the fathers in these Muslim young men's lives? Where are the fathers? I'm telling you, if my children, if my sons actually looked up to these guys, I would see it as a failure of my masculinity and my fatherhood. Sorry to say. Come on, man. You got these people that are just so antithetical to the spirit of Islam, arrogant, avidly materialistic, also saying things that are literally not in line with the Islamic values. Well, I'm sorry, we have to draw a line, have some self-respect and draw the line. Wallahi, uqsum billah. Let's be honest. If a sister who reverted, said some of the things that that particular person or other people have said, the whole social media would be on fire.
Yeah.
Would be on fire.
Like if a sister walked around with her shirt off all the time.
Come on, bro. that wasn't necessary.
You know what I mean?
But I get the point.
I'm reading the Quran in my underwear. You know what I mean?
No, that's not the point. Yeah, I get your point. But look, let's get serious. The point here is we have to be consistent.
Yeah.
And what it has exposed, in my view, is that a lot of our brothers, unfortunately, they're not principled. I'm going to be honest. It's maybe they're not aware of it, but it seems like a very unprincipled stance. It's a very unprincipled stance.
Does it also maybe also indicate low self-esteem? Like they don't have, because if you have, maybe you have those principles, but you're kind of shaky, like you know what the truth is.
No,
you know
I'm not talking about the particular individual, I'm talking about our du'at.
Okay, du'at.
Who haven't said as much as they should against, you know, maybe the perceived arrogance or the perceived avid materialism or the perceived, you know, haram pictures that have come out and, you know, un-Islamic principles that have been portrayed.
Maybe they're still going through their 72 excuses.
Yeah, but do it for others then.
Yeah,
but this is my point.
You don't do it for everyone.
Don't be consistent.
Yeah.
Because it's not within your, I don't know, algorithm echo chamber.
Yeah.
Right? You're basically a little bit more softer. To be honest, I don't consider this as manly behavior. This is a demasculated approach. This is not principled. Actually, it's not honorable. Come on, man. Are we still having this discussion? Are you saying to me, Wallahi, bro, you have children?
Yes.
You have a son, mashallah,
yes.
the 6-year-old, right?
Yeah.
Allah bless him. Let me tell you something. If you were to play the past year's clips of a certain individual in terms of what he has said, would you want your son to even listen to any of that stuff?
He wouldn't. He would be. He himself would not.
Yeah, I get it. Mashallah, well done.
Yeah.
But would you want him to access that
I
approach, mindset, that kind of characteristic, even some of the priorities or perspectives of masculinity that they're talking about, all of that stuff, right? To be honest, and I'm going to be very clear with you, right? A lot of this, in my view, and I'm psychoanalyzing this, is actually, I call it the fame of the fatherless, okay? A lot of the guys who are very famous online, they have very troubling past or troubling relations with their father, and no matter how they speak about them, when you actually understand the situation, it's a troubling experience, And what that happens is then you project onto the world to get that type of affirmation that you should have got from your father. Now this may be overdoing it, it's too much
I agree with you. I agree with you. You know why?
But I've seen it as a pattern.
No.
And I'll tell you why, because I've been in leadership positions. I'm still in leadership position and I see this trend. Now this is not to judge certain individuals, but people need to be self-aware that a lot of things that happen actually, when I see it, I see this is a weak man boy. With all due respect. I don't care how you frame it and this, that, and the other. I'll give you an example. The guy's brother, I was sorry to say, I'm a bit excited now, but sorry to say, someone mentioned him in a gathering and I said, this guy's homosexual. Now, I'm not saying in his sexual preference. I did it in a way just to show that, you know, he's not a real man. I'll tell you why. The guy justified having a pro-Zionist, pro-genocidal weasel, rat, in his inner circle and in the groups that they have. And he was justifying it to our brother Dili, may Allah bless him, because he was holding them to account. He was justifying saying, oh, we don't have politics in these things because we're professional men. Let me tell you something, if there was a pro-genocidal guy in my inner circle, I would be in prison or he would be in hospital. One of those two things. You're saying to me it's a manly thing to allow someone like that in the name of what? In the name of what? Of utility? Of because, you know, he might help you make money? What kind of immoral stance is that? Are we serious? It's equivalent of having one of Hitler's henchmen in your inner circle saying, I'm not going to hold him to account, I'm going to still have him in my inner circle because it's business, bro. That means you're just a slave, you're a dismasculated slave. You're enslaved to either the algorithm, to fame, to your materialistic objectives. I can't take someone like that seriously. Now they may be very offended if they're ever going to hear this. I don't care. I would fight you for this too. Let's get in a ring, no problem. Because someone has to speak now, bro. Someone, you've rattled me.
No, I'm good.
No,
I'm glad.
Someone has to speak because, look, I'm in a leadership position, whether I like it or not, and it's a big weight on the shoulders, man. And when you look at what's happening, enough is enough. How can we even allow? Wallahi, think about this. We are an ummah of the Sahaba. We are the ummah of righteous men. We are the ummah of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu an. We are the ummah of, Umar, who basically would not eat food because the majority of his people wouldn't eat that type of food. He was an ascetic. He had zuhud. He had, self-accountability. He was humble. He, when he went into Jerusalem, he was holding the riding beast and his servant was on there and his clothes were full of patches. The one who opened Jerusalem for us. These are the people, the Prophet ﷺ, who basically, in Shama'il Tirmidhi, he said, oh, what a wonderful curry vinegar is. He would take a piece of bread and dip it in vinegar. He will be, when he's invited to a home that had rancid fat, he would attend that house. The Prophet was so humble that, when someone came up to him and he was shaking, he was like, don't worry, I'm just the son of a mother who used to make jerked meat, right? This is the people that we came from. This is our tradition. And yet we have many of our youth looking up to people who are, with all due respect, from prima facie, from the face of it, arrogant, materialistic, unprincipled, antithetical. And you have other guys in America, I don't want to mention the guy's name, I have a lot of respect for him. Honestly, take your face out of his posterior, man.
Yeah.
Like, have some honor.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a great guy, we're doing things, brotherhood. Wallahi, when I see things like this, it's like I don't know what to say. You don't have principle or honor. What happened to honor, bro?
Yeah.
What happened to honor and principle? We should define ourselves with timeless Islamic principles, not utilitarian relationships. I'm gonna maneuver with him because he's famous and rich, because he's gonna give me some kind of goal as well. Have some honor for the community. We want our young men to look up to, frankly, people like you, bro. People like the volunteers, Dr. Umar.
Do you know how
that's who they should look up to? Not some man boy who doesn't have principle.
Do you know how Umar bin al-Khattab? Do you know how Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu anhu? You mentioned Umar, right?
I'm gonna get in so much trouble because of this podcast.
I want you,
but I don't care.
Because you mentioned Umar.
These are my views.
You mentioned Umar bin
please,
al-Khattab.
please.
You mentioned Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu anhu.
Yes.
Do you know how Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu anhu dealt with the Andrew Tate of his time? Do you know he dealt with a similar man like Andrew Tate?
He shaved his head and put him on the front line?
No.
That was another scenario.
So there's he was one of the kings, or you could say one of the leaders of within the Byzantine Empire, Jabala ibn al-Ayham, and he accepts Islam. So new revert. He's a new revert. He comes to Mecca. Umar bin al-Khattab, during his Khilafah, he comes to Mecca. He's making tawaf, and one of the Bedouins scuffs his shoes or like steps on his izhar or something like that. He punches him in the face and starts bleeding. So the Bedouin, he goes to Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu an, and he complains to him. And so Umar bin al-Khattab, he calls Jabala and he says, did you do this? He says, yeah, I did this. He's lucky I didn't do more. Like what he did to me, right? So Umar bin al-Khattab says, well, then you have to pay the price. You have to compensate him. There's a had for this, what you did. You did injustice to him. He said, I thought when I became Muslim, I'm going to be even more honorable, and it's going to increase me in my position, right? And Umar bin al-Khattab said, Islam made you and him the same.
SubhanAllah.
And then he said, then I'm going to leave Islam. And then you know what he said? Then I'm going to remove your head. He's a new Muslim, bro. Jabala is a king. He's a new Muslim. He didn't say he just accepted Islam. Maybe he doesn't know. Husnul dhan. He made it very clear. This is Islam. So Jabala said, okay, let me think about this. And the next day, he left. He escaped. He left. He went back into the territory of the Romans, right? But subhanAllah, this story, when you were going through this and telling me about Umar bin al-Khattab and how the story comes to my mind.
No, you're right.
You know
Look,
what I mean?
I've calmed down a little bit, but I still believe in what I said.
Yeah.
But it's important to.
I want to qualify this as well,
of course.
because the way I want to qualify is this, that when you become Muslim, we all adhere to a certain standard. We are all the same. And in terms of, yes, we give advice, yes, we make excuses for each other and so forth, but we should never compromise the deen and make it acceptable for us to say, okay, a person's a new Muslim, he has a platform, that fahasha and all these other un-Islamic ideas can be normalized. Do you understand what I'm saying? For me, the most negative effect is that if we say, okay, there's not enough pushback, there's not enough correcting of what's happening, and sometimes we can't just give nasiyah, because if you're saying I'm a big tough guy, I'm like tough and I show me shooting guns and riding motorcycles and doing this, but then when you're corrected, when a sincere brother who has ilm tries to correct you, and you say, oh, I thought Islam is peace, man, you guys are gay, what's wrong, you know what I mean? This is supposed to be your, you know what I mean?
Look, and we have to also understand that, look, when it comes to the game of online world, if you're making money from this and you're selling something, don't forget that they do the analysis.
Yeah.
Our dua to do this analysis, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, this kind of algorithm prostitution. Yeah, we prostitute ourselves to the trends of the algorithm and how we're going to get more traction. The algorithm is designed to create this echo chamber. Yeah, there is some migration in and out. We know. But also, if you look at the academic research on this, the algorithm is an encoded ideology. Also, when you look at the retention rates and people having a focus on the whole video, you will never get 100% retention rate. In actual fact, most people look at the first 10, 20, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes. So your so-called impact is what? Noise, fluff. In actual fact, echoing what Sheikh Hamza used to said many, many years ago, he said it's infotainment. And that's what it is. And that's why if you look at people's strategies, it's moved from long content to now 5 minutes, 4 minutes. Now it's reels and shorts and TikTok, which you don't even gain any type of transformative substance. I know this because I travel the world. We have Lighthouse Mentoring Service as part of Sapiens Institute, where we do one-to-one mentoring of people who have shubuhat, destructive doubts, people who are new Muslims, people who have left the deen and so on and so forth. And they have questions that are already answered online. But it's not enough for them. They need that one-to-one interaction. They need more substance. They need that psychological interaction. And what we've done, we've given too much primacy on the online world. Yes, of course we need it. Yes, it's important. I'm not denying that. We have that strategy too. But to say that is the main strategy for transformation, we have been duped. We have been duped because the algorithm is designed to create micro shifts in people's behavior. And it's created micro shifts in the behavior of du'at and their content. Just look at famous du'at and look at their past 20 videos. And then go 10 years back and look at their first 20 videos. Case in point. Yeah. We have been duped. And this is why I would even say someone like Sheikh Haytham is far more impactful than people who have 2 million subscribers. I know that because I know what he does. I know who he influences. Yeah.
Yes.
People who influence hundreds of thousands. Yeah. So you're not someone just because you got people following you. If that was the case, then Shaitan is someone, right?
Yeah.
But Shaitan's weak and his strategies are weak.
Yes.
Look, the point here is we need to be far more smarter. We lack strategy. And I just want to mention this point. Ibn Hazm, one of the famous scholars of Islam, he made a very interesting point about jihad, struggle. And he said there are 3 types of jihad. You have the physical jihad. You have the intellectual or the dawah jihad, jihadan kabira, chapter 24, verse 52, using the arguments of the Quran. And you have another one, which we don't really speak about, strategic thinking in times of danger. So we speak about the first one and the third one that I mentioned, but this one, we hardly speak about. And Ibn Hazm analyzes the life of the Prophet ﷺ, and he says, the majority of the type of struggle or jihad of the Prophet ﷺ was based on what? It was based on Quranic dawah, jihadan kibira, the great striving, the intellectual jihad if you like, or using the arguments of the Quran. And the other one was strategic thinking in times of danger. He didn't say like, one is better than the other or something from that perspective, from what I remember. But the point is, these were the ones that he emphasized. Because we know this because many of the battles the Prophet actually outsourced, like in a way that the other Sahaba were dealing with it. He didn't engage with it himself. The majority of the time was strategic thinking in times of danger and Quranic dawah. This doesn't belittle the physical jihad, of course not. Yeah, it has a high value, and we know all the hadith and the virtues and so on and so forth. But the point here is there's a lacuna, a gap in our thinking about the concept of struggle, the concept of jihad and our dawah, that we lack a strategy. Where is the collective strategy for our online dawah, bro? It's just reactionary a lot. Where is the strategy for our dawah globally, right?
Yeah.
And this is something this is maybe outside of my, what they say, pay grade. We need to get together with ulama and thinkers and sit together and think, what is the strategy for the online dawah? What is the strategy for the global dawah, especially in the West? And we need to think this through carefully. And the reason we haven't done it is because we lack an Allah-centric, Akhira-centric mindset. And I mention this all the time. Frankly, bro, not only do we have algorithm prostitutes, we have dawah pimps. Now, what does this mean? Sorry for the language, but I'm not here to make people happy, yeah? And I use this language deliberately because it will stick, yeah? So the algorithm prostitutes prostitute themselves to the algorithm in order to get likes, shares for an un-Islamic purpose, right? And they maybe sprinkle an Islamic purpose here and there, but it's mixed with other issues like fame and wealth or just pushing my narrative and so on and so forth. And the dawah pimps are what? Are organizations, masajid, that only invite famous people just because they're famous, not because they have substance. I was in a mosque in England. I think they will never invite me again. Who knows? But I was like, we have masajid, and I think I even mentioned that mosque as well. I'm like that. I want to be authentic. I don't want to have any undeclared negative intentions. So we have masajid, mosques that basically invite someone just because they're popular, not because of their characteristics, their righteousness, or their ilm, their knowledge, or even their hikmah, their wisdom. To the degree that if you ask the board members that invited them, and you said, would you allow your daughter to marry him, or would you want your son to be like him, they would say categorical no. This, with all due respect, sorry to say, this is dawah pimping. You've pimped out the dawah for a utilitarian, capitalistic, how are you going to have barakah? Wallahi. You think you're going to have longevity, right? You think that's what longevity is having all the likes and the money and the growing of the masajid and all of this stuff in your lifetime? I'm not in it for my lifetime. I want in the grave sadaqah jariyah, yeah? If you have that, kind of, you can't see beyond your nose kind of understanding of success, then you've misunderstood success totally.
Yes.
Success is in the akhirah. The greatest triumph is that we are shielded from the nar and we go to Jannah. Not this kind of capitalistic, following the manhaj of Elon Musk, following the methodology of, what's his name, of Bill Gates. What happened to the way of the Sahaba and the way of, wallahi, and this is, the Salafi du'at as well. Yeah, they know nonsense of stilts. I know, I've been in leadership positions, bro. I managed a global organization, we took it to 6 continents, alhamdulillah, managed another global organization. I know the sector. And there was a time when I was looking above me and I was thinking, there's no one that can spiritually inspire me. Because no one follows principle. You talk about, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz radiallahu an, you talk about Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu an, and where is it in your organization? Where is it? You're Machiavellian. That you conflate the vision with your organization. No, the vision should be lofty and it should be Allah-centric, Akhira-centric, and the vision is always bigger than the organization, and the organization is always bigger than the individual. And the reason I'm passionate about this, bro, because I made the decision when I was forced to be in a leadership position about 8 years ago, I made the decision that I have to stick to principle. Because it's easy. I could leave my organization and do my own thing. I'll probably make lots of money too. Right? With my influence, or even with the following that I have, or the skills that I have, I could be individualistic and brand orientated. I could do it. Yeah. But I would not be able to see my son in the face or my children in the face. Because you did it for what? Oh, but it's halal, bro. I don't like that attitude in the dawah. Halal. Shut your mouth, halal. There is a competition of halals. The du'at should have always the mindset, I want to do the thing that's most pleasing to Allah.
What happened to ihsan?
Exactly.
What happened to ihsan?
I want to do things that are the most pleasing thing to Allah. And many of us, we lack a certain question. And I say to them, I did this on X the other day, I told them to say, every day, every hour even, ask yourself this question: what is the most pleasing thing to Allah in this particular context? And remove the mindset from, oh, but it's halal, akhi. Oh, really? Surah Fussilat, chapter 41, verse 33. Allah says, who is better in speech than the one who calls to Allah, does righteous deeds, and says, I'm one of the Muslims. Verse 34, connecting to this verse, Allah says, good and evil are not the same. Repel by that which is better. Between two people there's hatred, there will be intimate friendship. And this is very difficult, except for the patient, for the steadfast. So we have to upgrade our kind of moral position on this issue. And
it's halal to make minimum wage, but is that your goal?
That's my point.
You know what I mean?
My point.
You want to make more, so
and if you're
you
gonna have
do
that,
more for the sake of Allah.
And if you're going to have that mindset in the dawah, you're going to sap away the barakah from the dawah. So you should ask, what is the most pleasing thing to Allah in this particular context? And when you look what's happening, there's a lot of brand strategies organizational brand strategies, individual strategies. And when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, there's a lot of Machiavellian things going on. There's a lot of individualism going on. In actual fact, bro, and this is so, wallah, we should be embarrassed. And anyone with any sense of maturity would understand this. We gun down liberalism. We have debates on liberalism. Liberalism is false. Look what you do, and it's atomistic, and the hedonistic principle, and this, that, and the other. We talk about liberalism, modernity, all of that stuff because it has the wrong ontology, the wrong epistemology, the wrong ethics and moral ontology and moral epistemology. Yeah, it's all wrong. Okay, good, but we're liberals. We've become. We are probably more liberals than some of the liberals. Because at least the liberals work together for a certain goal, right? You know, they have these ideas. If you look at Simon Sinek when he talks about, the why and all of that stuff, we don't even internalize these kind of concepts, right? And we're supposed to be anti-liberal, but we give primacy on the individual brand, primacy on the individual, strategy.
Yes.
Because when I look at the Dawah from a holistic perspective, I think there's so much wastage of resources. One person has got a new news channel, the other person's got another new news channel, and I'm thinking, well, you guys know each other. Well, where's the resources? Okay, but like competing good deeds, I get it, but we don't have the luxury for that at the moment, especially when it comes to these critical issues. So you waste resources, you become brand orientated, and this shows to me we don't have to work together. We don't have to have a collective vision. Now I know this sounds all doom and gloom. There's a lot of good going on, of course, and I'm trying to like enroll that in my organization and in my behavior as much as possible. But I'm saying this in a passionate way so people understand there's something that needs to be done.
Yes.
There's something that needs to be said. I was with Sheikh Haytham, may Allah preserve him, in South Africa, and I had this kind of like moment. I was like, enough's enough now. This online nonsense, enough's enough now. We need to start basically, dealing with, because I've tried to study what real impact is. And when I travel the world, a lot of these people who follow other people, they may have anecdotal evidence of transformational change of certain people, but many of them, unfortunately, 75% or so are unmarried men, and some of them don't even pray. Some of them don't even pray, bro. They don't even pray. They don't even worship Allah. It's infotainment for these people, And I think if we're really sincere to Allah, and we really want Allah's word to be the highest, truly, we need to really think strategically about what's happening online and offline and maneuver, because sometimes it may mean for us to shush, it may mean to pause, it may mean to take a step back, it may mean to close my organization. If that is the case, then so be it, because the vision is bigger than the organization is bigger than the individual. Anyway, look, I've been waffling a little bit on this issue, but I think a lot of this is to do with as well the tarbiyah of the du'at. The tarbiyah even of leaders. There's a problem with the way the kind of, if you like, the spiritual environment amongst the du'at and leadership. We don't focus on, and I mentioned this during the past few days that we've been having conversations and speaking, focusing on tazkiyatun nafs, like the spiritual disease of the heart, like kibr, arrogance, ujub, self-amazement, hasad, blameworthy jealousy, and riya, ostentation. There's a kind of lack of focus or emphasis on this issue, although Allah emphasizes it to the degree that He makes an oath around 11 times in one go, just for one topic, and it's the only time in the Quran Allah makes an oath like that, 11 times for one topic, and that's the one who purifies his soul, his heart, succeeds. Also Allah says, as you know, as many know, that you're not going to be safe on the Day of Judgment unless you come to Allah with qalbin salim, with a sound heart. So we don't focus on this issue, and because maybe for historical reasons, but the point is this is Quran and Sunnah, this is the way of the pious predecessors, that they were focused on dealing with riya, ostentation, they were focused on blameworthy jealousy, how to battle it, and ujub, self-amazement, which is one of the diseases amongst the du'at, right? It was me, look at me, right? They think they are the creator of the means, not the means, not just the means, right? And you have kibr, I'm better than you, or rejecting the truth even. They're rejecting the right way of being in the dawah, right? So we need to basically emphasize this a lot. Now, people have said to me, yeah, but it's very difficult, it's not quantifiable. But what kind of ridiculous secular detraction is that, or contention is that? We don't have this, you have to quantify deeds. Allah says He weighs your deeds, not necessarily counts them. Secondly, we know that deeds are accepted based on two aspects. One is in line with the sunnah, which you can see from a quantifiable perspective. And the other one is You have to have the right intention. You're doing it for the sake of Allah.
Yeah.
So by virtue of your detraction, then we should reject all deeds, because one part of the aspect of a deed to be accepted is actually unquantifiable. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
So
and there's also a very profound hadith of our Rasul in regards to deeds, because he told Aisha radiallahu anha that your deeds alone don't get you into Jannah.
Yeah, absolutely, it's the mercy
and
of Allah subhanahu wa
yeah, she says, even you, Ya Rasulullah, even you, even me, unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala envelops me in His mercy and forgiveness.
No.
Yeah.
So we need to focus this as part of our daily talk, our organizational talk, but it doesn't really happen, unfortunately, and that's why we basically are ending up doing things that are not optimal with regards to seeking the optimal pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah.
So this issue that you're describing, people focusing on their brands, and I feel a person who does that, they want to be accepted by everyone, because a brand wants to be mass accepted, whereas if you're doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you want the acceptance of Allah azza wa jal, right? So there's obviously a dichotomy here. What could be a practical self-corrective measure? Like, do we need to have almost like an ijaza system, like for du'at, like, hey, you can do like this dawah,
I think that's a good idea.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean,
and then you can say, okay, yeah, we can check it or something to that effect.
There's difficulties with that, obviously, because of the nature of our community. But the point here is, that's an interesting solution. Yeah. I need to think about it more, of course. But I think what's important is it's about leaders who actually feel what I'm feeling and feeling this pain, and many do, by the way. You've been nodding, others have been nodding. You get it. We're getting this kind of collective feeling that something needs to change, and some of the points that we're mentioning, okay, it makes sense, and we need to do something. We need leaders to take leadership, and that sometimes means to hold people to account, or to create a spiritual and social environment that doesn't dismantle people, but even if people are on a particular journey, we elevate them, or we create an environment and we believe in them and we take them on that journey so they become optimal versions of themselves. At the moment, that's not really happening en masse, right? And also, as I said previously about the focus on tazkiyatun nafs, the purification of the soul, dealing with kibr and riya and all of these things, and having an environment that facilitates that. Now think about it, if the pious predecessors were alive today, would they say by default position Muslims should go on social media and start spreading Islam? I don't think so. I think maybe the foundational view would be what? It's haram, or it's blameworthy, unless certain conditions are in place. So, we're scared to hold people to account. We're scared to discuss these issues. And one could accuse me of basically holding people to account indirectly, for sure.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with that, because someone needs to adopt a strategy that you feel that one would feel that would work. That's what hikmah is. You have an Allah-pleasing goal. I want to elevate the discourse, help elevate others and improve and optimize others. So I'm applying ilm in that particular context with specific individuals or a collective or an organization or a domain of work. And I'm applying the ilm in that context to achieve that goal. And I've made a decision sometimes at this stage, the indirect method, like talking on podcasts, writing things, having individual meetings, is at the moment something that will hopefully build consensus amongst fellow other leaders. And then after we could basically put our foot on the gas. Now I think it's time to put the foot on the gas.
Yeah.
We need to make drastic changes, because it's delusional, bro. Like, we think we're making massive impact, but in reality it's not. We're just getting famous. And that's it, really.
For example, if tomorrow you said this family lost their house, and say you have 1 million followers, and you make a call out, who's going to come tomorrow, sacrifice their day to help build this house for this family?
Yeah.
How many of those people are going to come out to that?
Yeah, probably not that many.
Yeah, if any. You know what I mean?
The other thing is important.
What's the in real life transition of that?
No, for sure. I mean, the other thing to know is the hadith of Prophet ﷺ when he talks about fame and wealth. Like, fame and wealth, right? Excessive desire for fame and wealth is more destructive to one's religion than 2 free roaming wolves amongst sheep. Now, if you know anything about wolves and sheep, if there's 2 free roaming wolves amongst sheep, it's a massacre. So your deen is massacred, your religion, your iman is massacred. And that's the excessive drive for fame and wealth. Today's dawah is basically driven, unfortunately, or the results of the dawah facilitates what? Fame and wealth, right? There's money involved, there's fame involved specifically. That's probably the major one. And that hadith itself we should just be really, really cautious. But we just throw ourselves in the public sphere. We throw ourselves into these brands and even to these organizations, and we don't take the necessary spiritual, social steps or mechanisms to actually prevent or mitigate the significant risk to our iman and our religion.
Do you feel there's an inner conflict within du'at where they may be aware of this, but because there's that pull towards, the algorithm is pulling you, the dunya is pulling, so then they're rationalizing and justifying
people know
reasons of khair as a cover.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Allah doesn't need you. Sorry to say, go home.
Yeah,
if you have that mindset, then you don't deserve this position. You think Allah needs your YouTube channel or your dawah? I mean, are you insane? Are we insane, bro? You think Allah needs any of us? We should pay to be involved in dawah.
100%.
Allah says in chapter 49, verse 17, that say to them, the Arabs who felt that Iman was a favor to the Prophet ﷺ. Allah says, say Iman is a favor to you. Imagine calling people to Iman. It's a compounded gift. And now you got this subconscious, ridiculous assumption that, I need to do this. I'm one of the warriors of Islam. Shut up. Come on, man. You can't even sacrifice, your ego for the sake of Allah. And now you think this is a frontline work, living in your Western world. I mean, you're delusional. Honestly, with all due respect, you're just delusional. Yeah. Allah doesn't need you. So this is about your iman and your acceptance of your deeds. And many of these du'at, they know a good solution for them is to stop and have a 6-month break. They know that. In actual fact, if the roles were reversed, if they become a father to themselves or a mentor to themselves, they would actually prescribe that as one of the solutions. Take a break. Refocus. Worship Allah. Do more tahajjud prayer. Engage in other more private deeds. Yeah? That's what they would actually mentor themselves, right? That's how they would mentor themselves. So this argument that, no, I have to do it because I'm telling you, bro, I really believe this. If I died tomorrow, within 2 weeks, even less, no one's gonna remember me. What I said, what I did, what I managed, what I produced, book, this organization, it's gone. Forget it. It's over. It's just gonna be me and Allah. You think the Ummah is gonna remember these great du'at? Like, let's be very honest, bro. Especially in our age of, we have flash in the pan type of dawah, yeah? And I said to one brother, bro, you think these people really give a damn? Like, obviously they love you because you're great and you're a good speaker and this and the other, you make an impact. But you think they love you in the way that a true believer should love someone, that they commit to your well-being? You die, they'll forget you after 2 weeks. Wallahi, they're righteous people. They don't make dua every day for their dead parents. And you think they're going to remember you? Do things that count for the akhirah. Be more strategic. Do things that are long-lasting and timeless. Right? Be like the greats. Don't have this kind of myopic understanding of success. This is shallow. So, so that's why I try and focus on things that would make a big impact, that fill a gap in the dawah. Yeah? Like I'm writing a book now on, it's called The Way of Love, 12 reasons why Allah deserves worship. Why am I focused on this? 2 main reasons. Number 1, I want the honor, bro, of writing that book. Yeah, I'm scared to lose it, yeah? Because I talk about it a lot, right? And I want it to be my thing. Not because of an ego thing, because I want, this is Allah's main message. La ilaha illallah. There is no deity worthy of worship except the deity, except Allah. Our whole purpose of life is ibadah, is to humbly adore Allah. The extreme of submission and the extreme of love. Ibn Kathir said this, Ibn Taymiyyah said this, many others. That's what worship is. It's the apex of love and the apex of submission. I want that honor, so I'm chasing it, yeah? Number 1. Number 2, it's a gap in the dawah. Google why Allah is worthy of worship, see what comes up, bro. And this is the main, dawah of those who hold the Quran and the Sunnah. Hardly anyone spoke about it, hardly anyone has written about it. It's a gap. I want to fill that gap, yeah, because I think it's needed for the dawah. And it's important because I feel it's one of the most important topics that children don't know why Allah is worthy of worship. People don't know. Why is Allah worthy of love? Why is He worthy of our submission? The Quran mentions it so many places. The Salaf mentioned it, the pious predecessors, the ulama, the ahadith, to do with gratitude and extensive praise and love and affinity and all of these things. There are more than 12 reasons, but I talk about 12 main reasons. And I want people to learn it and internalize it, and we need to teach our children. In actual fact, when I'm invited at universities, bro, and they ask me, Hamza, give a talk on God's existence, say no. I want to give a talk on why Allah is worthy of worship. Because I actually think, because we all have a fitrah, that's a very powerful way of unclouding the fitrah, if you like, to awaken the truth within. And I've done it to atheists, bro, because there's an argument in the book that I basically discuss that everybody worships, even if you don't believe in God. Yeah, and I define what that means. And it gets people to have this kind of existential crisis thinking, I'm always going to love something the most. There'll be a hierarchy of things, but there's always going to be something on the top that I love the most. There's always going to be something that I obey or refer to the most. It may fluctuate. There's a hierarchy of things, but there's going to be something on the top. And there's always going to be something that I express ultimate gratitude or extensive praise towards the most. It may change or fluctuate, but there's always going to be something on the top. That's my object of worship. Is that really worthy of worship? So then we say, well, let me introduce to you who Allah is. His names and attributes, His nature, and so on and so forth. And by virtue of just doing that, they're like, this is the deity that deserves worship. The fitrah will be crying out for that. It's a very powerful argument. It's an existential one, but I could unpack it another time. But I'm just giving you an example, not to like blow my trumpet, hey, I'm strategic now, I'm filling the gaps in the Dawah. I don't mean it that way. I just want to try and enroll people in that behavior, that think about there's so many decisions that are made, bro, that if you were to analyze them carefully, like, why was that decision made? Is that even important? Were you the one who was supposed to do this? Was that the right use of money? Was that the right use of time? What kind of strategy and methodology did you use to even come to that conclusion? What principles do you have or not have that made you end up having that conclusion? Right? And if we have more of a kind of Allah-centric, Akhira-centric, really seeking the pleasure of Allah and His word to be the highest, not only in the short term, but the medium to long term, many of the decisions that we make would actually change. Like in the UK, it may be wrong analysis, but I have a chip on my shoulder concerning these massive events. You have 20,000 people, 15,000 people, all these youth, sometimes there's free mixing, this, that, and the other. It's like a concert, right?
Yeah.
Fine, I get what you're doing. You're trying to get these people who are not 100% practicing. It's more like an ethno-religious identity for them, just identity markers, a bit of salah, a bit of hijab, and I'm a Muslim, but it's not their worldview, yeah? It doesn't form their ontology, their epistemology, and their ethics, yeah? The source and nature of reality, and, what is right and wrong, and, what is true, what is knowledge. Those things are not really answered by the Islamic worldview. It's a bit of liberalism, secularism, culture, and the rest is like, yeah, salah, Allah, stuff like that. It's not really a deen for them, yeah? And I get it. They want to take them on a journey. All right. Where's the journey?
Yeah, where are you going?
Yeah, well, I want to know where the journey is.
Yeah.
Like, what's your strategy? Because I don't see it. What I see is great marketing, kind of capitalistic type of marketing, which is, I'm not saying it's bad. If you use it for the right reasons, it's good. But are you preparing the community for what's happening in the next 10 years? No. And so they've been consumed by wrong decision making, not having, what I consider true insight. And I'm willing to sit with anyone. And if people know me, people may be watching this know me, I sit with all organizations, bro. I travel to Riyadh, help set up an organization. I'll travel with this guy. I'll help someone fundraise behind the scenes. I've identified with those principles. Even if my nafs doesn't like them, I'm going to do it because this is who I want to be. Yeah, and that's what I believe true leadership is. Because the final outcome is with the righteous.
Yes.
So if you want to ask me, Hamza, I want a fundraising strategy, I'll do it for you. Hamza, I want this, I'll do it for you. Yeah, because I know you upgrade the sector, not just the organization, because the organization is part of that wider sector, and all of those things should be seeking Allah's word to be the highest anyway. So it's all gain, right?
Yes.
Anyway, the point here is, I'm willing to sit down with anyone and have these discussions. I'm not saying what I'm saying is 100% right, and I've got all the answers. No, I'm trying to passionately raise that there are certain problems that we're not revealing to the people.
People need to appreciate that there's dynamism in how that objective is achieved. Because you talk about, being compassionate and, doing things in a merciful way and your nasiha and so forth. But I appreciate the fact that you're able to also be straightforward. You can be a little bit abrasive, and that's also needed. That's actually also needed.
Yeah. The older I get, the more abrasive I'm getting, actually.
One thing I really appreciated, because obviously we've seen a lot of evolution in Dawah and so forth, and sometimes even the inter-religious engagement, we saw for many years, was far too passive and almost submissive, to the other side. It's like, you're giving us a favor by being in this forum. And one of the, it's like me almost like in a football game, or I was cheering, like my kids are like, what? I was just watching a debate, and it's not normally a thing that you would cheer for, but I would just feel like this person is representing the deen with Akhira, right? Do you remember when you were in South Africa, and I think it was you and Muhammad Hijab were debating those two atheists?
Yes.
One of them, I think, is Oppenheimer. One of the guys, yeah. So the ones that are moderating that debate.
Yeah, they were crazy.
And one of them, I think he was Muslim on the panelists. I feel
I think he was a Shia.
Oh, it was okay. So and the moment, the part that I'm referring to is when you actually called out the debate moderators. You told them, I think you're being very either like facetious or condescending, whatever. But the way you said, like, you're not giving us or talking to us or respecting, what we're saying.
And, I mean, there was,
you know what I mean? And for me, that is a game changer, because many people would just come to it like this, how we saw many of these things play out. They would just accept that. Okay, yeah, if like it's a privilege. It's a privilege for us just to be here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, look, in retrospect, that debate could have, I'm kind of philosophically trained. I've got 3 postgrads in philosophy. I'm doing a PhD, and the conversation I was having with them towards, I think, the middle to the end, I know where I was taking or having these conversations. But styles make fights, as they say in boxing. Yeah, and in retrospect, although alhamdulillah, maybe our objectives were met, I think we killed a sparrow with a shotgun. Yeah. It's a Punjabi saying, actually. You killed a sparrow with a cannon or something. In some cases, a little bit of overkill in certain areas. The poor guys, because the whole framing was like, colonial and racism and stuff like that. And I think that was basically, in retrospect, not entirely appropriate. But yeah, you're right. So holding them to account was an important thing.
Yeah, because I felt like there was no issue. Like, you guys were taking care of your interlocutors very easily. But then I could see it, the way that they were talking with you and Muhammad Hijab, and the way that they were talking, the way that they were dealing.
Yeah, it's true, and you can't. It's impossible to bully Hijab. He'll fight back.
And for me,
and he didn't let that happen.
For me, that in and of itself is a dawah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
Because you're showing that the truth is represented with courage.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so I really appreciated that, and I think that's where the tarbiyah aspect comes into play. It's not necessarily only what you say, it's how you say it and how you represent.
Agreed.
You know what I mean?
Agreed. Look, there's a lot for us to reflect upon, and there's a lot of improvements that need to be made in the online and offline dawah for sure. But in general, there is khair. There's a lot of goodness that's happening as well.
Yeah.
But some of the kind of emotional expressions that I've made during this podcast are there to get us to realize that there are some things that if the trajectory continues, the barakah will be leaking away. The blessings will be leaking away from our successes or the dawah, or even the successes that we can, the greatest successes we can have are not going to be given to us because we're not following the right way of being, the correct principles, and it's something that we need to really, really, really focus on. And
because I feel what you're you're intuitively.
Yes.
You're calling for a traditional approach, because traditionally we had guardrails.
Of course.
Within our learning. The Salaf would not accept people unless they fulfill certain conditions. You can't just become a student of knowledge if you have no adab.
Yeah, of course.
And your opinions aren't going to be taken, and you can't attribute yourself to certain shuyukh and have that, be part of the sanad or whatever.
It's a safeguarding of the dawah. It's a safeguarding of Islam. It's a safeguarding of how we basically portray Islam to the wider community. It's because it's a huge responsibility. And look, we are where we are. I'm a strong believer of how you relate is what you create. So we should relate to ourselves and to the du'at in a way through our language and body language and the environments that we create in a way that we believe that there is an optimal version of that person. And then if we treat them as if they are that optimal version of that person through our language and body language, we create that optimal version of that person. It can take time. It can take 5, 10, 15 years. But I think if you give someone an environment and you believe in them and you treat them in that way, which I think is very prophetic, you can actually create the best version. Yes, it doesn't mean you have to always be soft. Sometimes you have to hold them to account and be assertive for sure. And that does happen behind the scenes as well. And like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the way he used to treat like Fulan or Julaybib or Fudala ibn Umar, the way he would use his body language, obviously with the males, and the way he would speak to them, he would create an optimal version of them. Like Fudala ibn Umar wanted to kill the Prophet, although he became nominally Muslim, he was circumambulating the Kaaba. And he said, what are you whispering to yourself? And he kind of hesitated. And the Prophet put his hand on his heart and said, ask Allah for forgiveness. And then Fudala ibn Umar said, after that moment, no one was more beloved to me than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So his language, his utterances, his body language was such that basically create an optimal version of that person. You have this in many aspects of the Sunnah. We should, adopt that. We're not here to like throw people under the bus and say people are like this or people are like that. Yeah, sometimes we have to do it, and we've done it today. But at the end of the day, I am like hopefully sincerely really dedicated to the well-being of the du'at and all people. I think my life in the past at least 8 years has shown that, managing Akhira, managing Sapience and trying to take things forward and sometimes taking bullets. Taking a few bullets actually, which is alhamdulillah, this is part of the tax we have to pay to be in this blessed position.
It's very difficult in the era of sound bites and superficial analysis. Everyone does reactions or superficial analysis to have like an in-depth conversation. For example, when we started off the conversation, we were talking about many of these influencers, and I feel people do not have the ability to decipher between accepting portions of truth and not necessarily accepting the full person.
Yes.
As your hero or your savior or as a role model, right? Yes. For example, can we learn something from Shaitan? Yeah, we can.
We have.
We can. You learn Ayatul Kursi.
The virtues of Ayatul Kursi.
Yeah, we can learn that from Shaitan, right? But do we accept Shaitan?
No.
We'll never accept Shaitan. Yes, we accept the truth wherever that truth may lie, and we can accept that. But in this era, it's like I either love you or I hate you. I like what you're saying, and I'm in love with you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you just accept everything.
Very tribal. It's like the new form of tribalism.
Yes.
The new form of tribalism. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And the Islam came to defeat that type of tribalism.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's something that we need to actually, and that's why, look, even having conversations like this are important. I'm going to look back at this conversation and thinking, I should have been more nuanced here. I should have unpacked this further. But platforms, it's impossible to do that. Otherwise, I should just write a book on the topic and give it to you. But the good thing of having conversations like this is it starts to create and plant the seed, creates the narrative, start to get people to frame things in a different way, to start seeing impact in a different way, to start seeing barakah in a different way, the success of dawah in a different way. It will highlight problems that they've been blinded to. Thinking, okay, what is the solution? It will hopefully create more of a maturity in assessing some of these things rather than us being, oh yeah, he's so great, he's so amazing. That kind of immature fanboy, manboy attitude, right? And also, it's to indirectly at this stage hold people to account and say, look, this is not principled behavior. For one person you apply a particular principle, for another you don't. Why? What's driving that kind of almost hypocrisy of principle application? It's your utility. You think you get more benefit from this and less benefit from that. That is such a dishonorable, unmanly way of being. I'm sorry to say. Sorry, come on, man. Like, my dad is not Muslim, right? May Allah guide him, yeah? Like, he is such an honorable person. He wouldn't even dare to, especially in public work, to be like this. And then I'm looking at the community thinking, subhanAllah, you were not even following these principles? Yeah, I have a chip on my shoulder, so be it. Yeah, of course I do.
Yeah.
Because we should do better and be better.
Yeah.
Isn't the Quran and the Sunnah our guidance, the way of the Salaf our guidance?
Yeah.
Of course it is. But you got leaders, reading the books of Elon Musk and Bill Gates and this, that and the other. What about the seerah? What about the principles from the Sunnah to apply in your organization? But it doesn't work, akhi, or you're not going to make as much money. Oh, so that's what it's about, yeah? It's not about Allah's acceptance. So you're part of the problem, my friend.
Yeah.
You're part of the problem. This is like capitalism sprinkled with a bit of Islam, or this is a capitalism with a topi.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We need to be principled, because for me it's a sense of meaning, bro. I've had that crisis since I was 12. Meaning is very important for me. If it's meaningless, I can't deal with it. Yeah. Obviously, fine. It doesn't mean I have deviated away from that approach for sure in my life. But generally speaking, it has to be grounded in something meaningful that transcends me. Otherwise, I cannot appreciate it. I find it dishonorable. Actually, it's dishonorable. It has no true meaning. I can't deal with it. Right? Like, you know, I could say that I had the ability to be, you know, a very successful program and project management consultant. I was one of the youngest consultants in the UK at that time. Yeah, getting a day rate, this, that, and the other. Business analyst, program project manager, developing program officers. Some of my friends that I knew that I actually helped them get a job, they were getting, like, at that time maybe £1,000 a day. Yeah, you know, that could have been my career. But you know what? I just didn't have love for it. I'm not kind of a money-orientated guy. I was like, I have the skills, but it was meaningless for me. I'm involved in this way because it's meaningful, right?
Yes.
Likewise, people should adopt the Islamic principles and stick to them because it's meaningful. It carries weight. It's Allah's pleasure. It will give you more barakah at the end. How many people have had short-term successes? Short-term successes. And they died, and then, for example, their masajid became churches, or the masajid became uninhabited, like there was no one basically worshipping in those masajid. We need to think of the beyond our life, right? And sticking to principle counts, because that's where the barakah will continue beyond our life, right?
Yes.
How many people wrote 40 ahadith? So many. You have Shawwal al-Dahlawi, you have the Arba'in of al-Nawawi, and so on and so forth. But which one stands out in the ummah? An-Nawawi's 40 hadith. Why? Because the ulama say, you know, there was extra ikhlas, if you like. There was an acceptance. And that transcended his life, right? Point here is, we need to stick to principle. We need to actually explore some of these timeless leadership principles from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ concerning things like unity, things like how to develop people, things like tarbiyah, things like tazkiyatun nafs, things like strategic thing in times of danger. All of these things are available for us to actually explore and apply in our modern context. But where is it? Who does it? We want to read the works of this person, that person. Fine. There may be some elements of truth in it, but the ontology, the epistemology, and the ethics is not part of the Islamic paradigm. So it's not going to be the thing that we actually need. Yes, you may use it as a stepping stone, but allow it to encourage you to look into our deen and look at the principles of the Salaf, the principles of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and apply it in our organizations. Yeah. Because a lot of us, by the way, bro, are Machiavellian. The ends justify the means. Like, unprincipled human being can you be to live a life that the ends justify the means? But I'm getting loads of shahadas though, or you know, but we're getting lots of fundraising money. At what expense? At your honor and the acceptance of your deeds? Are you insane? I mean, are you like, you've gone cuckoo? Like, with all due respect. If someone came up to me, and may Allah protect me from this scenario, and not use my words against me, and said, here, Hamza, here's £1 billion for Sapiens Institute. But a condition for that £1 billion is, I want you to sack 2 key members of your team, and I want you to basically change your focus to add a little bit of, you know, humanitarian work. I would say no. Because I believe there's no barakah in breaking principle. How can I look at my children in the face saying, I sacked a really great guy for no reason, just because someone gave us money? Because the value of that person is more than the £1 trillion, right? I say this about my wife. You know, if someone gave me like $1 trillion, I said, get rid of your wife, get another wife. I'd be, no way, because what she gives you is more than $1 trillion. It's actually, it's priceless. You can't put it into money. Sorry to say. I mean, some people...
Not sorry to say.
Not sorry to say. Do you see my point? Yeah. So, you know, people, because I want to give people intrinsic value. I don't want to use them as a means to an end. No, they are the ends. They have intrinsic value. And look how the Prophet ﷺ would describe some Sahaba, right? Or describe even the weight of their legs. I forgot the Sahabi's name now. He had very thin legs.
Abdullah ibn Mas'ud.
Yes, radiallahu an.
And more than the mountain of Uhud.
The more than the mountain of Uhud. Look at that. That's intrinsic value, right? So, anyway, the point is, I want people to just explore and emphasize that, because if you really want success, true success, that final outcome is with the righteous, Allah says. And true success is holding on to these timeless principles. And yes, sometimes there's a space to navigate flexibilities when you apply those principles within the paradigm and the parameters of Islam. I agree. I'm not saying this is a utopian way of understanding the dawah and leadership. No, I'm not naive. But
you know what you're saying is you're trying to get, like, I feel too many organizations are just in that short term, or as you said, that myopic view of like what their organization is doing or should be focused on, or always in emergency mode. So for example, we have so many organizations that are raising money for emergency mode. There's starvation, there's war, there's orphans, but there's no strategic thinking and development and long-term strategy. How can we prevent orphans?
Yes.
How can we safeguard from wars? How can we prevent that instability and so forth, right? Where are the strategic thinking for long-term self-sustainability and self-reliance and resilience?
But a lot of that is because sometimes we forget the bigger picture, which is we're doing this for Allah. We're doing it for Allah's pleasure. And I'm just going to repeat the question that I want everyone to ask every day. What's the most pleasing thing to Allah in this particular context? Ask that every hour. And the minute you ask that question, reframes the way you're going to be, who you're going to be. Because you're thinking, okay, this is a great goal for the organization, goal X. But in context of this question, actually, we should change the goal now. Do you see? Just by the power of questioning, the power of reframing. Because sometimes we get stuck in our organizations, it becomes a professional job, it becomes like targets, but we forget the bigger vision, the bigger picture, and we forget, well, what is the most pleasing thing to Allah in our particular context? And for many, it's actually changing those goals, changing a methodology, or maybe changing a particular approach, or uniting with others and sharing resources with others. The amount of resources that we've spread, and if we were to do some strategic tweaks, bring some organizations together, maybe, remove this department, bring some other resources here, share particular resources, change the strategic focus, align the vision here, the success would just be exponential. But we don't do that because organizations and brands now become tribes. Yeah, and actually people read books about this issue, marketing tribes. This is your tribe, and they just focus on it. Email marketing, this, that, and the other. It's just part of the narrative. It's like a new form of tribalism, right? Just like the tribalism at the time of Arabia, and we need to deal with it. And having that question allows us to really enhance the dawah in so many effective ways, honestly, wallahi. But, people don't see it. They might not even see it when they listen to this as well. But I'm going to repeat it many times, and we should all repeat it, because our job here is, we're ambassadors of Islam. We want Allah's word to be the highest. We want people's hearts to be connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We believe in the perennial absolute truth, which is there's no deity worthy of worship except Allah. There's no deity worthy of utmost love and utmost submission, unconditional obedience than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We want the whole world to know this, because this is going to free them from the shackles of the dunya. It's going to open the door to the akhirah, eternal bliss. And love for humanity, what you love for yourself, love for your brother, what you love for yourself. The Prophet was a rahmah, loving mercy to all the worlds, and an expression of that is actually wanting people to be guided. In actual fact, Allah wants everyone to be guided. Allah says in the Quran that He doesn't prefer disbelief for His servants. If you look at the Mufassirin, Allah is basically wanting, that's why Allah revealed the Quran to us, right? So it's a rahmah, it's a mercy, and this is what we want. And if we want that and we want Allah's utmost pleasure, then we should basically just spend time thinking. And think about this, bro, practically. Wallahi, we're in the West, yeah? Mashallah, big houses, nice cars, good job, this, that, and the other. The amount of thinking that we have done to get a degree, the amount of thinking we did to get a house, whether it's, I don't know, Islamic mortgage or not, or whatever. The amount of thinking we did to pick the right car, even the shoes that we're wearing, even the wife that we have, or whatever the case may be. The thinking and analysis and strategy that we adopted for these things is far more than the dawah. We take the dawah less seriously. Like, oh yeah, it's good, we'll do it. Khalas. Oh yeah, let's do this. Yeah, it's my brand. Yeah, it's nice, good marketing. Boom, shahadas. Whoa, let's do it. But we don't have that deep, multi-leveled, multi-layered type of thinking and approach to think what is the best thing for Islam? What is the better thing for Islam? What is the most optimal thing? What is the thing that's closer to the optimal pleasure of Allah? We don't really ask those questions. And that's why I get a lot of people saying, but it's not haram, bro. I'm like, oh my God, you're in the wrong game if you're going to ask questions, if you're going to respond that way. You should be thinking, okay, what is more pleasing to Allah? Because remember, Shaitan has around 6 strategies for us.
Yeah.
One of the strategy is to take the better deed and make us do a lesser deed. And that strategy, Shaitan has won over the Dawah, man. He has consumed the Dawah with that strategy.
Yeah.
People know that there was a better deed to do, but they didn't do it, they did the lesser deed.
Yeah.
In actual fact, they did a deed that could even be blameworthy because it's a waste of amana, a waste of, resources, money, charity money. And this could be not just a lesser deed, it could be sinful itself, right?
Yeah.
So these questions, even if...
I think about that challenge and what you feel about reframing the perspective. Everyone needs to go through that journey. Just as you said, it's like, oh, it's not haram, bro. Like, it's not haram to live in a cardboard box. But that's what you don't aim for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Absolutely. Like, you always aim for something better. But because I think we don't value it. Like, I really appreciate it when I find somebody, you value the deen. You value Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You value the seerah. And that shapes that worldview, because when you have these people, as we mentioned before, who online, who put value in these materialistic things, they're all defective. That are even, I was reflecting upon this. Imagine, some of the brothers, they really want to get married. They're enamored with a certain sister. It's like, you know what? I guarantee you do this thought experiment yourself. The most beautiful girl you want to look at. Imagine only you can do is look at her. So all you're doing is you're looking at her. After some time, you're going to get sick and tired of looking at her. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
say something. You know what I mean? Or you start noticing defects or whatever.
Yeah.
Anything that you want so badly in this dunya, you're going to find some type of defect or limit or something that will eventually disgust you and repel you.
Yes.
In this, except for what comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What the guidance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us is the same example I give with music. I said to the brothers and sisters in the audience, I said, listen, have you ever had a song that's super catchy and it gets stuck in your head? It's like, yeah. What ends up happening? It's like, it becomes like a headache. I want to get it out. Even though it's so catchy, you're like, oh yeah. And it becomes, but if you keep hearing that same song again, it becomes in your head like, it's like a headache. It's like a drill in your head. I said, have you ever had that with an ayah of Quran? That I need to get this ayah of the Quran out of my head?
SubhanAllah.
I keep hearing this ayah? No. Rather, when we memorize Quran, we want to keep saying it. We want to keep saying it. How many times, Akhi, have you read Fatiha?
Yes, SubhanAllah.
Have you ever been, I'm sick and tired of hearing the Fatiha? Ever?
It's actually
has the Fatiha ever given you a headache?
Yeah, subhanAllah. In actual fact, some Salaf would recite one ayah in like tahajjud and in their prayers over and over and over again, the same
exactly.
ayah. Yeah, for sure.
Alhamdulillah.
But this also links to another thing about ego and legacy, right? Because sometimes when you look at the Dawah and even some people who claim to be mashayikh, I get this sense that there's this legacy building going on. And there's nothing wrong with legacy building, but is it really Akhira-Centric legacy building?
Yeah.
Like there's all these kind of like almost appeasement to the ideological hegemony. Like for example, I did something on apostasy recently, and the reason I did it was, one main reason was because I think we have an obligation as du'at, irrespective of our applied legal moral understanding in the modern context. Because obviously many laws you can't apply today because you don't have the kind of social political environment, you don't have the kind of social political goals of a particular environment in order to implement those laws in a just way. But irrespective of that, I wanted to do it because we have a moral and a duty, Islamic duty, to justify or show the supremacy of the original application and source of the law. Yeah? I had a call with a famous scholar, Da'i type. Obviously, I'm not going to mention names because it's a private call. And there was kind of pushback. Why are you doing this? You're making it difficult. Just say this, that. I said, I agree. You can't apply it in a secular sense because we don't have the Islamic social political environment with all the kind of, different structures in place and the social psychological goals in place that would facilitate justice and blah, 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 blah. But we have to defend the original application of the law and the original source of the law. If you stay silent, that's cowardice. If you stay silent for the sake of not getting friction from people who are more liberal or secular, or the people that you want to appease, is disgraceful. And you have to reevaluate what your legacy is and what you want to achieve in your dawah. Because we live in this liberal hegemonic space, and what happens is when you stay silent on justifying the original application of source of the Islamic moral legal reasoning or the law or whatever the case may be, if you stay silent, then what happens is the liberal assumption comes in, which is it was immoral. Its original source and application is immoral. And you're saying it can't be justified today or can't be applied today because we don't have it's modern state, it's secular modern state, and Islam is very holistic and comprehensive. We don't have an Islamic state with the social, political, and psychological goals of that social environment in order to facilitate justice and so on and so forth. That's not in place. So it's an irrelevant thing to talk about. And if you stay silent on trying to show the supremacy of the original application of the law and the original source of the law, then you allow the liberal assumption to come in, which is, these guys were barbaric. Of course they're barbaric. It's a good thing that they can't apply it today, right? And that silence for me is in my view, intellectual cowardice.
And
yeah? Now, I'm not saying
to agree, to a degree, I would also say that silence is consent for the dominant,
the dominant paradigm.
Yeah.
So there's few things that could be in place. Maybe they have their own strategic thinking and goals, and maybe they're Islamically justified. Allah knows best. But from the prima facie, from the on the face of it, right? But what I'm seeing here is that deliberate silence is very problematic, and it's a pathway to modernist liberal thinking, and eventually the destruction of an understanding of traditional Islam, and it's an indication of someone not having a really good Allah-centric, Akhira-centric vision for themselves. Where do I want to be in the Akhirah? Is my vision for myself actually something that is pleasing to Allah? And is it connected to a lofty goal that transcends me and transcends organizations? Is it a lofty vision that transcends all of this stuff that I want to be part of for the sake of Allah? So we need to have that evaluation, because, or it could be that they're ignorant. They don't know the trends of ideologies and how they work, yeah? And if that's the case, well, it could be a bigger problem as well at the same time. I'm mentioning this because it's something that I want people to realize as well. It's not always what people say. It's actually what they don't say, which is very important, especially in the dawah, yeah?
Yeah.
Very dawah. Like you have du'at, for example, that would deconstruct and, almost attack a particular person. That seems to have a righteous reason. But really, the only reason they did it is because they're not happy with them, yeah? And then they frame it in an Islamic manner to actually basically justify what they've done. But when you see their silence on worse people, then you're thinking, you're
selective.
You have no honor.
Yeah.
All due respect, it's a disgraceful thing to do.
Yeah.
Did you actually ask yourself, what does Allah want from me? What is the most pleasing thing to Allah? When I see things like this, I really agitated, because it's like almost injustice, isn't it?
Do you think a part of it, because sometimes we can't self-diagnose, do you think a part of it is our brotherhood, our community cohesion has broken down? Ad-din an-nasiha, right?
Wallahi, that's such a beautiful point. So insightful.
Yeah.
So insightful. Some people can self-diagnose if they've got used to it and they've been trained through mentorship, through sitting with scholars, through going through that tarbiyah, for sure. But generally speaking, some people don't see it.
Yeah.
Some people don't see it, and they need people around them.
Your ego is the biggest deceiver, man.
Yeah, the enemy is the greatest enemy. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why we have to revive good friendship from an Islamic perspective, because even in the dawah, unfortunately, friendships are just utilitarian. Like some of the guys who are friends, I am of the view, sorry to say, I am of the view that they wouldn't even share a pint of milk together if they didn't have any utilitarian benefit. In actual fact, they would fight. They wouldn't get along. It wouldn't be a natural friendship to have. Now, I'm not saying it's always wrong to have a utilitarian relationship. Sometimes you have to benefit of others for a higher goal. I agree. But as a principle, we don't have true friendship where we are committed and dedicated to the well-being of our brothers and sisters. What does that mean? That I want true goodness for them, and true guidance for them. In actual fact, I've been reading a lot about love because of the book that I'm writing. And there's a book by M. Scott Peck, yeah? I think that's his initial, M. Scott Peck. He makes a really interesting point about love. He said love is actually being dedicated to the spiritual optimization of another human being.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really deep. It's like it echoes the Islamic tradition, yeah?
Yeah.
And even Al-Ghazali, when he talks about self-love, he doesn't talk about it in a narcissistic way. He says self-love is like wanting good for yourself. In actual fact, many of these thinkers like Eric Fromm, M. Scott Peck, Al-Ghazali and others, that self-love, you can't really love if you don't love yourself. Not in a narcissistic sense, but you want goodness for yourself, you want guidance for yourself. You're the closest thing to you, bro. If you can't, it's like a form of self-empathy. If you can't love yourself or be empathize with yourself, then how can you do with anyone else who's a little bit more distant?
And then you would also love somebody who gives you the harsh truth if you need it.
Exactly.
Imagine close friends today. Could they say to each other, "May your mother and father be bereaved of you"?
That's my point.
You know what I mean? And you have this between Abu Bakr and Umar,
Absolutely.
the close companions.
So this is the point.
Yeah.
So the point I'm making here is that, you know, we need to be dedicated to goodness and guidance for other people, which is really a reflection of our own self-love. And if we don't have that self-love, really, you don't have self-love, you may have a form of narcissism or egoism, yeah? And you think it's self-love, but it's not. So if I'm committed to your well-being, bro, I want goodness for you and guidance for you, then the way I relate to you should be that I optimize that goodness and guidance. So if you make a mistake on a podcast, right? Say you just did it right now. You said something that is blameworthy. And given the context, I should fix it straight away. Being optimized, wanting to optimize your well-being and your goodness, I should hold you to account in a way that facilitates that growth, right? Even if I do it in a passionate way. Or if I found out that you did something, or your strategy with, you know, NYM Inc., right? If your strategy is a little bit, you know, I think it's not in line with an Allah-centric vision, Akhira-Centric vision, I should pick up the call and say, bro, what's going on, man? And I should do it in a way that I'm optimizing. I really want your goodness and guidance. Not just for me to prove myself right and prove you wrong, because that's ego. But rather, hold you to account. And even if it means I have to be assertive, that's true love, bro. I'm telling you, bro, I've experienced this myself. Dealing with du'at and other people of influence, or even people who are not even online, just people in general. You speak like that, oh my God, you may create a fight, or you may basically have an argument, or they're not willing to be held to account, or they just deflect and they turn the tables on you. What about you? You did this 10, 15 years ago, bro. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on here? We have failed to understand what true friendships are. In actual fact, many people listen to this, they probably don't have good friends. They don't have people who are committed to the spiritual well-being. I want you to go Jannah, bro. I want you to have well-being in this life. I want you to have full goodness. If I really want you to have well-being in this life, full goodness, and I want you to go to Jannah, not just Jannah, Jannatul Firdaus, the highest level of Jannah. The way I talk to you and act should be in accordance with that. Yes or no?
Yes.
And that means when you make a mistake, or you deviate, or you fail, that I'm able to actually hold you to account in the most sunnah way possible and optimize you. When you do that now today, it's offensive. Like, we all have yes men around us, a lot of people now, yeah? Even sisters, brothers, they don't have that true friend. Marriages are not like that, bro. You know, marriages are utilitarian. Okay, she looks good, right? You know, I heard some brothers say she's got mileage, yeah? Meaning, I got maybe 30 years with her before she starts deteriorating, yeah, which is not a very good framing of marriage or love, but I've heard that language. They tick box that. She comes from a rich family, tick box. I'm not going to be embarrassed if she hangs around with me, tick box. She's got a degree, ticks box. She's got this, tick box, yeah? All of this tick box stuff, right? And so you're framing it though from the perspective of, what do I get in return, yeah? Which are goals that are not entirely Islamic, like, you know, I feel a sense of pride, she's with me and whatever. You know, you get the point.
Yes.
But the relationship itself, as it matures, is not like I'm dedicated to your well-being. You miss Fajr, I overlook it. As long as I'm getting what I need from you, you're pretty, you're rich, or whatever, the rest of it is irrelevant. We don't know how to love, bro. Imagine being with a spouse like that doesn't care about your spiritual well-being. Doesn't want you to have the highest place in the Akhirah, or doesn't want you to have true well-being, because your well-being is only going to be through coming closer to Allah, yeah? don't, as Allah says, don't be like those who forgot Allah and Allah made them forget themselves. So what's really important is that your relationship should fundamentally be meaningful. Meaningful, that you both of you want to go to Jannah together, to have well-being. But many relationships are, how are we going to buy the house? When are we going to buy the house? The kids have to have grammar school. They have to look good when they're out. They have to have, the social decorum. They can't shame us. Me and you, yes, okay, we'll sleep together. We'll express our, desires. We'll go out. We'll have fun. We'll take selfies. We'll have some basic conversations. But there's nothing deeper than that. Yeah. And that for me is because we don't know how to love people anymore, bro.
Yeah.
And love in Islam is such a phenomenal, like look at the Prophet ﷺ, look at Khadija radiallahu anha, the way she consoled the Prophet someone who's coming down from the mountain, right?
Yeah.
Commitment to his well-being. Look at the way he described the love of Khadija radiallahu anha. Her love nourished me, which is interesting because hubb, is the root, shares the same as the seed, right? Because and the seed grows into a plant and it could nourish, right? So the whole concept of nourishing is phenomenal, It's probably one of the best ways of describing love, or at least a form of love, So, we don't know how to love anymore. The Sahaba had that love with each other. I want you to go Jannah. I want you to have well-being. To the point they would sacrifice. They would sacrifice their own resources for that to happen, Us, God forbid I have to spend some time with you just to help you. God forbid I have to be there for you.
Why were they so transformative? Like you look at Abu Sufyan, who used to be like the worst enemy for Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then you fast forward to the Battle of Yarmouk, you're talking about love, where the Sahaba, and he's amongst them, are like literally passing water to the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually was thinking about that when I was talking.
Did you understand what I'm saying? But it's so transformative because at one moment, your mission in life is to kill the Prophet ﷺ, and then in another moment, like it's a very short period of time, you've changed yourself to that point where you love your brother so much you're willing to die for them.
Because love for them, and this echoes what Al-Ghazali said, and Eric Fromm says, even M. Scott Peck, love is not a feeling, just a feeling. Love is not a falling in. Love is a standing for. We have to stand for our brothers, bro. We have to stand for their well-being. There are some brothers that, you don't really feel lots of emotional love for them because they could be very difficult. But I love them to the degree that I stand for them. And not just that, there's something even greater, bro. Because they had the concept of loving for the sake of Allah. Not loving for the sake of utility, not loving for the sake of a feeling, but loving for the sake of Allah, the one who is the source of love, the one who is Al-Wudud, the most loving. Al-Wudud coming from the Arabic word wud, which means the loving that is giving. And they loved for the sake of Allah, which means I'm going to stand for you, be committed to your well-being, because Allah wants your well-being, wants you to go to Jannah, wants you to optimize, wants you to have a flourishing life and an Akhirah, because that's the whole point of revelation and sending down the Prophet ﷺ. And they are going to do what they can to express that, because expressing actions and your utterances and the way you speak and act to them, to achieve that is love, because love is not just passive, it's active. Mostly it's active. If you even read the popular book, The 5 Love Languages, it's all actions basically. Acts of service, words of affirmation, touch, quality time, and so on and so forth. These are manifested in the real world, the actionable items, if you like. Anyway, so you manifest that, and you're doing it for Allah's sake. Meaning, even if they do not reciprocate, even if they hate you, even if they don't, they don't give you some kind of utility, you're still doing that for them. And that is one of the most difficult loves to have. But what does Allah say about those who loved each other for the sake of Allah? What does the Prophet say about those who loved each other for the sake of Allah? They're going to be under Allah's shade. Sah?
Yeah, and they'll be on pulpits of light.
Absolutely, and that is amazing. Imagine loving someone for the sake of the most loving. Loving someone for the sake of the most loving someone for the sake of the source of love, loving someone for the sake of the maximally loving and the most perfectly loving, who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah, His loving mercy, rahmah, rahameen, the womb, right? A mother, and the child in the womb, a mother loves the womb, loves the child before the child is born, right? Nurtures the child, sacrifices for the child, wants to nourish the child. And the Prophet said that Allah has more arham, more mercy for you than a mother has for her child, right? And I don't even like calling it mercy, it's loving mercy. Because in English language, when you think about love, it's more in line with rahmah actually, yeah? If you understand what love is in English, which means a committed to your well-being, wants to nourish you. Obviously, there's a different taxonomy of divine love in the Arabic Islamic theological tradition. You have, you know, muwadda, you have hubb, you have rahmah, you have for example, Allah's Ar-Rahim, which is a special mercy for believers on the day of judgment. We get that, but that could be unpacked theophilosophically another time. But the point is, Allah has a loving mercy, Allah is Al-Wudud, and His love transcends. Even from understanding Allah's names and attributes, they're maximally perfect. To compare them with a human being is anthropomorphism, is shirk, is associationism, right? So we know Allah being the most loving, His love is greater than even a mother's love. Now one would argue, but wait a minute, but isn't a mother's love unconditional? Well, Allah's rahmah is unconditional, loving mercy. So Allah says His love, His rahmah encompasses all things. We have, I think it was Ibn Jawzi, he narrates Hassan ibn Ali and Qatada, I believe. I have to double check, but that narration is in the book. I'll get the reference for you. He says Allah has loving mercy, has rahmah even for the criminals and the disbelievers, right? Because His rahmah encompasses all things. But there is a different levels and taxonomy to divine love, of course. So there's the unconditional aspect. It's not conditional. Allah's rahmah is not conditional on one's belief. Secondly, a mother needs to love. A mother's love is contingent. She cannot not love. A mother needs to love, it completes her. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not require completion. Allah gains nothing by loving. Allah is as-samad, He is absolutely independent. He's al-ghani, the rich, the free, but yet He loves in the most maximal way. Imagine how pure Allah's love is. And this is one argument why we should want to love Allah, because just the conceptualization of how maximal and pure Allah's love is, you just want to be on the path to love Allah. And that's why, you know, we should reflect on the ayah in Surah Al-Imran when Allah says, if you love Allah, then follow me. Say, if you love Allah, follow me, meaning the Prophet ﷺ, and Allah will love you and forgive your sins. So a way to gain that love is to follow the Prophet ﷺ. But the point here is, Allah's love is so pure and maximal. Now, where was I going with this? Just remind me. Actually,
I think we were talking about like how powerful that concept.
Yeah, so you're loving for the most perfectly loving. Allah has the most purest form of love. And so this is why
when you love someone for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's incomparable to any other type of love.
Thank you very much.
And you know, subhanAllah.
That's why, by the way, that's why I say to my wife, I love you for the sake of Allah, and my nafs loves you as well.
No, you know what? I'm going to use that line because I always tell her, I love you for the sake of Allah. And she gets offended. I'm like, no, this is the most powerful form of love. If you love somebody
but Islam also does understand natural love as well. Yeah, for sure.
But you know, another, I think, powerful example. This is, to me, every time I think about it, I said, this is like what's in their hearts. This is a revelation of what was in the hearts of the Sahaba. So you know when, you know, ayat of Quran came and alcohol was made impermissible, right? And so the Sahaba, they broke all the alcohol containers, threw everything away, and they went to the masjid, right? And for me, that's a pivotal moment because like, this is a huge like law that's being passed. It's affecting a lot of people. Maybe people have addictions. They're used to drinking alcohol. It gives them a certain feeling. They go to the masjid. What is the first question they ask? What's the first question that after this massive law that is affecting everybody, it could affect your business, it can affect everything. The first thing they ask, what of our brothers in faith that died with alcohol in their bellies? They're loved. What can they do for them? They're dead. But they're still so concerned, what about them? You understand what I'm saying? And then of course ayat came saying that they're not held accountable for what they did. But do you see the care? This is the first thing you care about? This is the first thing you're thinking about? You're thinking about what is their position going to be on the day of judgment?
But this echoes a beautiful point that true love is being committed to people's spiritual optimization and well-being. And that was expressed through the Sahaba. What's the Akhira going to be like? Subhanallah. So I want people who are listening to actually think about this. You have friends. Are you committed to their spiritual well-being? Like truly? Are you committed to their flourishing from an Islamic perspective, right? Forget dunya flourishing, which obviously from an Islamic perspective can also mean dunya flourishing as well. You want them to do well for sure. But are you committed to them having contentment, them coming closer to Allah, them being optimal version of themselves, and them having a great place in the Akhirah? Are you committed to that? Do you express yourself to them that way and act in accordance to that? With all due respect, probably 99% no. And your friend's the same to you. And this doesn't mean you have to squabble now and say, you're not my real friend. It means everyone now needs to understand what real love friendship means. You know, real philia, I think Aristotle would describe it. He said philia, this love friendship is like putting two souls in a bottle, shaking the bottle and not being able to distinguish, you know, whose soul belongs to whom, yeah? Now, whether you like that in a poetic way or not is irrelevant. The point here is we need to be like this. And this really, the whole concept of love and loving each other in this way, being committed to our spiritual well-being is actually the solution to everything that we've talked about today, bro, I think. It's the basis, it's literally the basis. And that comes from a state of heart that doesn't have kibr or hasad, arrogance or blameworthy jealousy or riya, ostentation, or even ujub, self-amazement. It's a softer heart, yeah? And that's why the importance of focusing on the purification of the heart, doing your adhkar in the morning, the evening, reciting Quran, doing tadabbur of the Quran, doing tahajjud, doing your fara'id, contemplating on nature, all of these things soften the heart. And it facilitates this loving for the sake of Allah. And it facilitates these meaningful relationships, right? And you know, this is why it's so important to raise this with people so they upgrade. And everyone's on a journey. No one's saying, oh, you're in a bad place now. No, there's so much khair in your life, so many blessings, so many great things. You have iman, alhamdulillah. But the point is, just know where you can go. Yeah, you can improve. This could be much more to your spiritual and social life from an Islamic perspective by loving people for the sake of Allah and being committed to the spiritual well-being. And then you'll get that reciprocal effect anyway, even if you don't want it. They'll be committed to your well-being as well. And you'll have such a deep, profound, meaningful relationship, not only with your friends, but with your spouses. Yeah? With your spouses, right? It won't be shallow. And that's why a lot of people are getting divorced now, bro. You know, he lost his job and, you know, he's getting old now and I fixed myself up, khalas, I got an education, I don't need him now, right? That means that the original basis of your relationship was shallow and meaningless in the first place anyway. Right? Are you committed to each other's spiritual well-being and you're flourishing from an Islamic perspective, from a dunya and akhirah point of view? Come on.
If muadda is gone, what about the rahmah?
Yeah, subhanAllah. Thank you very much. So this is something very important for people to think about and internalize, not in a way, and usually this happens for some reason. They take these ideas and concepts and they use it as a stick to hit people with, right? Oh, you don't love me enough, you this, you that. No, you need to internalize before you externalize. Internalize before you externalize, because we're part of the problem, right? And you know, once we fix ourselves, then everything else starts to fix up as well. Because do this. Start loving your friends for the sake of Allah and your spouse for the sake of Allah in this way. Commit to the spiritual well-being and so on and so forth. And yes, enjoy them as a spouse as well, and all the utility stuff is perfectly fine. But do that as well. I'm telling you, you won't even need to hold them to account and tell them, I want you to do this for me. And naturally, the barakah will come. Naturally, things will just evolve. Naturally, she or he will be responding in a way that is like committed to your spiritual well-being, showing true love, committed to your goodness and your guidance. Allahu Akbar.
I think this is a sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a law of Allah that when a people sincerely love for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings it back to them.
Yes.
You know, there's a statement of Imam Ahmad that again shows the type of person he was inside, rahimahullah. He said, he made a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that if I could be a ransom for the sinners of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then make me that ransom.
SubhanAllah.
Okay, you know, subhanAllah, what kind of love is that? You know, that type of, then people like, of course, they love, you know, him as a faqih, but if you look at it, there's many fuqaha.
Yes, true. SubhanAllah.
But people have a special love for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. And you know, some people think, hey, this is not very masculine, Hamza, yeah? Because they're infected with the red pill or God knows what pill, ridiculous understanding. No, this is being masculine. This is learning to love people for the sake of Allah and being committed to the well-being is one of the greatest masculine or even Muslim traits that you can have. It's one of the highest virtues, and it's something that we don't talk about much. In actual fact, we say it. Like I hear brothers, I love you for the sake of Allah. Of course they do, and they probably understand it to a certain degree, but do they really know what that means? Because sometimes the way you're spoken to and the way they act, there's a disconnect.
Yeah,
right?
it's like, how are you doing? And then you tell them, Akhi, I have this illness. Oh, too much information, bro. I didn't really mean that. You know what I mean? It's just something you say.
But that's the point. So we've made it into kind of almost like a spiritual slogan without any meaning and substance. And we just have to just, hold our own selves to account, create an environment. Enroll, don't control, another leadership principle of the Prophet ﷺ. Because as you know, the Sahaba, they were a bit reluctant to follow the command of the Prophet ﷺ to shave their heads. So he goes to Salama, his wife, radiallahu anha, and he kind of makes a complaint to Shura. What does she say? She says, shave your head. And then when he shaved his head, they all followed. So this is the principle of, enroll people in your behavior. You don't necessarily need to control them. Enroll, don't control. That's how I phrase it. Enroll, don't control. There's times to control, of course, in different contexts, but generally speaking, enroll, don't control. And, lead by example. Be the change you want others to be. So even when it's in a home environment, if you want love, then you need to be loving. You can't wait for love. You have to be part of the solution. If you want to love for the sake of Allah, then you do it first, right? You can't say, you know what, Habibti, you don't love me for the sake of Allah because you never asked me about, tahajjud prayer or doing duha prayer or doing the adhkar in the morning and the evening or doing this, that and the other. You're not really concerned about my Quran, about my ikhlas, or you're not challenging me. So you're just using me a utility. She'd be like, you're my husband, you have rights. And she's right to say that. That'll be a wrong way of framing it. If you want that deep and meaningful love and that meaningful relationship, then you need to be it. You need to be it, right? If you're not, because states of being give rise to states of being. Love gives rise to love. Passion gives rise to passion. Certainty gives rise to certainty. And especially as a man, you have that qawam, you have that strategic leadership, that authority, that taking care of. You're the top of the hierarchy in your family. You're the CEO of the house and the family, if you like, right? You need to lead by example, right? And you need to enroll the whole family in that behavior. Be committed to their well-being. And that means if you get pushback, negative, or something is said, or a woman's like a bent rib, don't try and straighten her. There may be things that she said, just ignore, just let it go. Don't be a tyrant. This is a tyrannical. It's not sunnah behavior. Have your red lines and assert them, but they have to come from the sunnah, not from any alien ideology. And within that, there's a lot of love, mercy, compassion, forbearance. But have the red lines. And you have to enforce them if they get crossed. You can't just suggest them because they're not red lines anymore, but don't be like the tyrannical guys who are like, everything's a red line. Oh, she rolled her eyes, red line.
But that's linked to your ego then.
I call them manboys. I call them just tyrannical, egotistical, pharaonic type of behavior in a microcosmic sense. But the point is, have your red lines, but ignore some of the pushback sometimes. And because you're doing it for the sake of Allah, remember, it's not necessarily reciprocal. And you're loving someone for the sake of Allah, for the sake of the most loving, the maximally loving, whose love is most pure and perfect and maximal. You're doing it for Allah's sake is because when you get any negative reciprocation or pushback, it doesn't affect you. You still love them for the sake of Allah.
And we need more of this. We need people who are actually in loving relationships, long relationships, have children. They have, I think, more of an authority to speak about this. Sometimes you see people talking online. It's like, you're not even married. You're talking about, talking about relationships and how many children do you have, and what kind of tarbiyah and development have you done with these children? You know what I mean? Like, alhamdulillah, I've been married for 18 years, right? And there is a lot, that you go through that process, and when you understand more, and when you see some of the advices that you see, I'm like, dude, you are living in some kind of weird, like, distorted reality.
Yeah,
You're like living in a fun house. You know what I mean? it's like,
for sure.
It doesn't
But
make
that
sense.
comes with experience and maybe maturity as well, because as you develop, you start to realize that, you move away from love is just a feeling to love is not a passive effect, it's an active thing.
Yeah.
And you start to understand love is not falling in, but it's actually standing for, which is a very profound framing on love itself. And it's a commitment to the well-being. Because think about this, and the problem we have in our relationships, friendships and marriages and all of these type of relationships, not just marriage, different types of relationships within our ummah. The reason, especially in the West, they're kind of crumbling, or they're not that meaningful and they're not that strong, they're kind of weak, right? Is why? Is because I need to capture my thoughts now. What was I saying? So love, relationships.
All these relationships crumbling because...
because... I forgot what I was going to say. It was to do with feeling. Like we chase the feeling. We think love is just a feeling, or it's something that we should feel. But that's not necessarily true. It's a standing for. But I had something else I wanted to say. It's completely jumped out of my head.
One thing
when
that...
I remember, I'll get back to you.
One thing that I myself have experienced is that with anybody that I've learned from, any of the shuyukh or the teachers that I've had, I always feel a responsibility that they are deserving of my love because they benefited me in such a way that it's you can't repay that back. And the akhlaq and the adab and the etiquettes that go along with that and the appreciation that go along with that is a reflection of that relationship. So it's not like I learned from you, I benefit from you, and now I've forgotten about you. I still try to reach out to my shuyukh, still try to fulfill their needs, still try to connect with them, see how they're doing, their health, etc. Try to even visit them just for the sake of visiting them. There's no, I have no business in that city just to go visit those shuyukh and just spend some time. You know what I mean? And when I talk to some of my students or to some other of the brothers and sisters in regards to that, it's a very foreign concept because here, learning, teaching is all commercialized.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You rate your teacher. You know what I mean? Is your teacher like, how much value did I get from paying for this course?
Yes.
You know what I mean? But that concept is so much more deeper, right? And we see that tradition of our pious predecessors, like Abu Yusuf, the famous student of Imam Abu Hanifa. Imagine loving the gathering, the role, the responsibility that he had so much that he left the ghusl of his baby boy that had just passed away to his neighbor because he did not want to miss the halaqah of Imam Abu Hanifa. He said, my baby boy has died, but if I miss the halaqah of Imam Abu Hanifa, I will die as well. You know what I mean? That's how he looked at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, subhanAllah, when you see this, like sometimes it's like, there's these stories in Western, like Romeo and Juliet, like this massive display of love, like the sacrifice for love, right? But I would say there's nothing more powerful than, loving, as you mentioned, for the sake of Allah.
Absolutely, and I just remembered now what you just said there, just triggered it,
Yeah.
So, because our friendships and our marriages and our relationships are within a liberal Western context, right? Because we live in the liberal ideological frame, it makes us more individualistic, right? So therefore, and it makes us more utilitarian based, meaning that we just use people for certain ends. You're a means to an ends. You're not an ends in yourself, right? And that itself is very problematic. And therefore, what happens? You end up not really loving them. You're loving yourself narcissistically. The German-born Korean philosopher, he wrote a book called The Agony of Eros. His name is Byung-Han Chul or Chul-Han, yeah? And he basically argues something very phenomenal, bro. I think you might agree with this perspective. He's considered one of those thinkers in philosophy that creates paradigm shifts in thinking, yeah? And in his book, The Agony of Eros, and he indicates this in other books as well, he basically says, because we live in a liberal, modernistic, selfish, narcissistic society, individualist society, we have made the other disappear, meaning the object of your love, like your wife or your friend. they don't exist anymore as themselves individually. Yeah. I think he calls this the tyranny of the same, because liberalism, although they value difference, they actually want everyone to be liberals. Yeah. Yeah. So he basically says you remove the individuality, their context. So and also because we live in a narcissistic, individualistic world, what we do, we project ourselves on the other disappears, and you end up just loving yourself. Here's an example. Take the love language as an example, right? Love languages includes touch, acts of service, words of affirmation, gifts, and quality time. Yeah, and there's different manifestations and expressions of them, right, and intensities, and that could be for friendships and for marriages, right? If my love language, bro, is touch and quality time, and your love language is words of affirmation and acts of service, but I am expressing my love to you with my love languages, right? Touch and quality time. Are you going to feel loved? No, because your love language are totally different.
It's like that old joke when the husband buys his wife a bowling ball.
That's Homer Simpson. Yeah, Homer Simpson does that. Yeah, Homer Simpson's bought Marge a bowling ball and it's got his name on it. Yeah, exactly. So the point here is, that is me being kind of, I don't like using the word narcissistic because a lot of people Google that and they call their husbands narcissists and they do self-diagnosis. It's ridiculous. But the point is, it's a narcissistic trait to project yourself. You think you're the world. You project yourself on the beloved, and you end up loving yourself, not loving them. Because if you're truly committed to the well-being, because remember, Islamic well-being also means, yes, you want their spiritual well-being, but you want them to feel loved and taken care of. Yes? But if you know, for example, your spouse or your friend's love language is touch and quality time, but you're just giving them gifts all the time, their love tank is not going to be full. And the reason you do that is because you're either narcissistic, egotistical, or you're not humble enough, because love requires humility. Love requires a sense of subjugating your ego because you want to be committed to the well-being of the other, not just you. And this is one of our crises because we live in this liberal, atomistic, secular world that emphasizes the primacy of the individual, individualism, and by extension, maybe these narcissistic traits. We ignore the other and their individuality. I'm going to love you like the way I want to feel loved. Is that loving them truly? And this is such a profound point that people miss out. I was mentioning this to one of the brothers, the volunteers, what a great brother. I was like, bro, have you considered making her feel loved? Do you ask her if she actually feels loved? Maybe think you're doing the right things because that's what makes you feel loved. Can you stand in the possibility that maybe the way she feels loved is doing something else? And I think his kind of internal reaction was, but I don't like doing those things. Well, you don't really love her. Or there's a little bit of ego that you need to deal with because the true beloved would subjugate themselves, their ego and their likes, to do something that the beloved feels loved. And when in the process of doing that, you know what happens? You start liking it anyway. And the process of doing that, they return love to you in a way that you feel loved as well. It's a win-win. But people don't have that maturity about what real love means. I see it in friendships, in relationships, in family, in brothers and sisters. It's like, and that's why I really respect brothers who really attack liberalism and the hegemony, right? Because it is a disease. You don't see it. You're like in this environment and you don't realize, and it's affecting the way we understand love at every strata of society, every relationship and hierarchy, and all of the relations that we have, because we've been infected by the liberal and narcissistic discourse. And it was a very profound insight by that Korean-born German philosopher. But it echoes exactly what we're saying about for the sake of Allah. I wanted to raise that because it shows the role of what ideologies do to the individual human. It trickles down, right? It's not just an academic discourse. It's part of the social, ideological, social, political fabric, culture, environment. It's like you're a fish in water. Does the fish really know it's water? It realizes when you take it out and it starts, panicking and wants to get back into water. Sometimes we don't realize we're a fish in water, right? And that water is the ideology of the time. We have to really reflect on love people the way they want to feel loved. And that's a true commitment to their well-being as well. And that requires humility though, and it requires you not projecting yourself onto them, you understanding them as they are in terms of their own individuality and how they feel loved. And if you really commit to their well-being, then you love them the way they want to feel loved. And in that process, it will be amazing reciprocation in a way that would take the friendship or the relationship, the familial relationship to another level. But that requires a sense of egolessness, because humility is so important. And that goes back to tazkiyatun nafs, goes back to the heart, goes back to your relationship with Allah, goes back to that, because salah, practically and spiritually facilitates humility. Dhikr facilitates humility. All the spiritual practices, tahajjud, recitation of the Quran, tadabbur of the Quran, opens your heart, makes you more humble, makes you more graceful, and so on and so forth. So all of these things really is just an expression of our spiritual state, if you think about it, right?
100%, yeah. No, alhamdulillah.
Yeah. How we moved from Jordan Peterson to this guy to this freedom of speech, and then now we're talking about love.
Yeah,
and
I would love to continue, and I think we could probably continue for like another 3 hours.
Yeah, we'll do a part 2 one day, inshallah.
No, we will, inshallah. Very soon. Bidnillah, very soon we'll make the sincere niyyah for that, because I think we got to keep it, man. We got, alhamdulillah.
Bringing the passion out.
Yeah, there's good chemistry, alhamdulillah. Very good chemistry, and I really enjoyed it. And I think, like I said, we could keep going. And inshallah we will. And I appreciate your time, your effort. Once again, having the notorious HAT with us. Alhamdulillah, so many different topics that we discussed. And I think the underlying theme, I think, for our viewers is that really don't just scratch the surface. Like go in deep. Try to develop not just information, but wisdom.
Yes.
Make an objective for wisdom, not information. And I think with that path, that you'll benefit much more. You'll transform a lot more. So with that, to our viewers, as always, we live by the Haqq, we die by the Haqq, and just when you think life is stuck, tune in to Life Haqq. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.